He's on an absolute knife edge. And his Sussex coach Paul Farbrace told talkSPORT now is the right time to bring him back after all of those injuries.
There are risks to anybody taking the field, but there's risks to crossing the road. So, you know, if you stop doing it, you wouldn't take a risk at all. So the bloke's raring to go. He's a game changer. And you can hear from Ben Stokes there. He's absolutely excited to have him back.
Buzzing.
And we're into the final four of Wimbledon now. Novak Djokovic will meet world number one Yannick Sinner after getting through his quarter-final match last night. But there is concerns over how fit he'll be after suffering a nasty fall on centre court.
The real impact or effect of what happened, I will feel tomorrow. So let's see. You know, I'm hoping the next 24 to 48 hours that the severity of, you know, what was happening on the court and what happened is not too bad. That I'll be able to play it, you know, at my best and free of pain in 2 days.
For all the latest news, head to the website at talksport.com.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Jim White and Simon Jordan, and we're live on talkSPORT. So Lyon win their appeal as their relegation from Ligue 1 is rescinded. So what impact does that have in both France and the Premier League? We'll shed light on that very shortly with the key individual at the centre of it all, live with Simon and myself in studio. Also today, we bring you the very latest transfer news on Madueke, Kudus and Danny Rowe Sheffield Wednesday return. We'll cross to Switzerland as the Lionesses get their Euros defence back on track. And from midday, Spencer Oliver will join us as we go through all the top boxing stories. It's Jim White and it's Simon Jordan, and we are live in talkSPORT.
100% engagement. Jim White and Simon Jordan on talkSPORT.
Another morning, another show. Mr. Simon Jordan, good morning to you.
Good morning. Beautiful day out there, isn't it?
Beautiful day, Simon. They're going to find it piping hot at Wimbledon, I think, today. We're going to be over 30 degrees in this part of the world yet again.
Djokovic marches on.
He was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
He was amazing. I love the way the guy talks at the end when he wins, Simon, as well. Full of praise for the young Italian who he beat. But he was terrific, Djokovic.
Yeah, I mean, they are all the time. Even in defeat, they have humility and respect for the circumstances. They never find excuses. We never get to hear about the, you know, whatever injuries they may or may not have and how they didn't feel well today or they haven't had enough rest. And so it's always nice to hear that because it's part of elite sports that you win and lose.
Yes, indeed. Well done to him. Wimbledon getting very interesting now. So too, the Club World Cup over in the US. PSG did a number on Real Madrid last night, winning by 4-0. I mean, Simon, when you look at it, they've got to be the best team in the world if they end up winning this, haven't they, PSG?
Well, given their current achievements, yeah. You know, obviously, Liverpool being the champions of the Premier League, being eliminated by PSG. And some would argue that the winners of the Premier League are often the best team in Europe. And Man City have proven that to be the case when they won the Champions League and did their treble. Look, the fact is that PSG are in a rich vein of form. It's ironic, isn't it, for all those years that Nasser was, spending inordinate amounts of money to get himself into a position where the football club had relevance and significance, and people like me were calling it a Fabergé egg because it had all these wonderful players and no seeming heart. And now you've got, he's cleared them out, got rid of the pain in the backsides that the Mbappés and the Neymars and even the Messis of the world.
Yeah.
Built together a team, and Enrique's done a fabulous. And look at this side.
Yeah.
They've ripped the league. They've ripped through the tournaments in France. They've ripped through the Champions League, beating all the best sides to do it. And now they're in the final. And it will be some achievement if Chelsea are able to neutralise them. I mean, you'll have to, despite all the protestations about how much of a tournament has no meaning, even Danny Murphy would sit here, and if Chelsea were to nullify and to win somehow against
that would be something
PSG,
else.
that would be something else.
Yeah, I do honestly feel, though, that if PSG end up winning it, and you have to think they will, although Chelsea fans will think differently and hope differently, the champions of France, the Champions League winners, and then the Club World Cup winners, then PSG would have to be the best in the world. Late last night, I got a message from the president of PSG, Nasser Al-Khelaifi. Simon mentioned him moments ago. One more to go, and he'll be hoping that one more is the one that really matters. Simon, we might be the Club World Cup. It might be from this point going onwards. It's going to be an all-European final because they've stood out from the rest, have they not?
Yeah, I mean, we will necessarily think and naturally think that the European sides are the best sides in the world anyway. And that's been rudely interrupted on a few occasions when we've played in the World Club Championships and you've seen them paired up against one another, whether it was Liverpool in the 80s or more recently in other incarnations where the Brazilian sides like Flamengo and other people have come through and won these games. But such is the strength of domestic European football and such is the wealth of it that it should be winning. Now, of course, the leveller in this, the equaliser in this tournament, was the stage in which the tournament was played and the heat that it was played in.
Yeah, true.
And yet still, the European sides have come forth.
Oh, they have. I mean, the US team's very ordinary. Even the South American team's pretty ordinary. One of those being the Brazilian club Botafogo. And we know who's got an interest in Botafogo. Yes. And that is the man John Textor. Now, Crystal Palace are likely to be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon will be in the Europa League. But the FA Cup winners, Crystal Palace, will not, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. That centres specifically on one man's involvement in both clubs, and that man is US businessman John Textor. In a few moments, John Textor, having arrived by Eurostar in London this morning, is about to get out of a chauffeur-driven car and come to the second floor, because if he goes to the 17th floor, we won't be there. The second floor, where we in the studio await him. I'll be very interested to hear how John Textor approaches this, Simon, because Crystal Palace fans, quite unsurprisingly, have a bunch of questions they want answered this morning, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think John's main motivation is he doesn't want to do anything to hurt Crystal Palace. Obviously, he is a majority shareholder in Lyon. I mean, he stepped down from various positions because of the optics, and he'll explain to you that situation himself. And his big thing is that he doesn't want to do nothing to hurt Crystal Palace. And to some extent, having sold his shares at what he perceives to be a haircut, i.e. a reduced price that he could have gotten, is him suggesting that's precisely what he's trying to achieve. I maintain that other people have also roles in this. And I'm not blaming Parish necessarily, as people seem to think I am. But if you're the decisive influence in the club and you know that one of your shareholders is going to prohibit an opportunity for you, then surely it's incumbent upon you to make sure that administration is done alongside the person that's a shareholder. Now, whether that person as a shareholder wanted his shares to be put into a blind trust earlier, we can ask him when he comes in. But the fact is that they have divested themselves. The idea, Parish runs Palace.
Steve Parish, who's currently
universally
at the
accepted.
Top of the club at Crystal Palace.
It's universally accepted.
Who bought the club from you?
Yeah, he's universally accepted as, let's use the term very loosely in that context.
Right. Just to put it into perspective for listeners.
But he will have the controlling influence over the club. So the idea that because Textor has 43%, it illustrates on paper, decisive influence. The reality of the internal mechanisms inside Crystal Palace should detail that it doesn't do that. And of course, then compounding the issue by selling your shares, it really only it creates an issue if UEFA want to be towing the line of the law without any flexibility. Now, I'm all for, if the rules are the rules, I'll be the first person to say it. Of course. Yeah. But there are situations where exceptional circumstances manifest themselves. And if you've got a detailed internal perspective that shows one person, irrespective of his shareholding, has a decisive influence, and then you've got somebody else suggesting, even though they've got a 43% shareholding, that they don't have a decisive influence, you've got testimonies to that extent, and then you've gone and sold the shares. I think you can find your way through this. And
but the fact of the matter is this: the Crystal Palace fans are on tenterhooks this morning.
Yeah.
Because they went to Wembley in good faith. They showed, and you know this more than me, that they're amongst the best supporters in the land and played a part in getting their team over the line in that FA Cup final. And now they're listening on tenterhooks this morning, wondering,
of course,
if the European competition that they, by rights, have qualified to play in, that opportunity is going to be taken away from them because of how this man John Textor has gone about it. Now, John Textor is going to be sitting opposite me and to your left very shortly.
I would say,
and we have to put that to him.
Well, you will. I'm sure you will. I would say that when you take someone's money, ultimately the shareholders, it's like blaming, like everyone forgets to blame Martin Edwards or anyone else that sold their shares to the Glazers when they sit there going, awful people leveraged our football club. But what about the guys that sold the shares to them in the first place that allowed them to do that? So the shares that were sold to John Textor, knowing that he wanted 75% of the football club and not 43%, were sold on the basis of the shareholders wanted the dough. So the people that profited out of it should also be held accountable for the lack of administration. And the fact that the money that Textor put in, and he'll tell you himself, I'm sure, funded Palace through COVID. So you've got to work your way out through this and go, right, the flip side of this, Palace fans going to watch the FA Cup final. I watched the FA Cup final as a Palace fan. My first thoughts were not about the Europa League. My first thoughts were, can they win the FA Cup? Of course, the associated benefits then becomes clear, or you're in the Europa League. Now, of course, Palace want to be there. If the worst case scenario manifests itself, and I'm not suggesting it should or it could, or it will, or any defence of it, if you landed in the European Conference League, win it. Then you're in Europe for 2 seasons, aren't you?
Well, yes. But am I right or am I right? At the start of all this, you said to me, "No, Crystal Palace will be fine."
I think they still will.
I think they'll be fine.
I think they
Crystal Palace, as it stands this morning, Simon, are likely to be demoted to the Conference League after the ruling in France saw Lyon's relegation to League 2
as it stood
rescinded.
Last week.
So Lyon are all right, but Palace are in it.
As it stood last week, you and Julian Laurent sat on this show and said, as it stands, Lyon have been demoted to League 2. Well, that's as it stood at that particular moment. And now it stands that Lyon are not demoted to League 2. They're in League 1 and their position is reserved and protected. So my anticipation is that whilst Palace have got a challenge, first and foremost, if they get booted out of the Europa League, you think they're going to take it lying down? No, they're going to appeal it and they're going to take it to CAS.
The competition starts in weeks.
Well, that's fine. These are the challenges, right? But the fact of the matter is that they're going to be in a European competition, so they can still buy for a European competition. Let's stop that nonsense.
All right.
They're going to be in one European competition, so they can still buy for it.
Yeah, not the one they intended to be in.
No, fine, and I understand that, and that's the one they should be trying to protect. But if the worst case scenario comes that we can't buy, we don't know where we are, you're going to be in a European competition. You know where you're going to be, one way or the other, so you can spend if you want to.
Sure.
Secondly, you're going to appeal it, and we know that CAS operates under a different set. We've seen it. We've seen Man City get out from underneath. I'm using my terminology carefully.
Yeah.
And overturn the UEFA judgment and go to CAS and get CAS to look at it through a different prism.
Right.
And Palace will seek to do the same thing.
As it stands this morning, Lyon will be in the Europa League next season, but the FA Cup winners, Crystal Palace, will not, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. And that centres specifically on one man's involvement in both clubs. He is US businessman John Textor, and John Textor will make 2 become 3 in the studio after this break, because Textor will join us live.
plays that villain role very well now. It's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
Everybody, it's Jim White and it's Simon Jordan. It's Thursday morning, Thursday, July the 10th, and we are live on talkSPORT. It's going to get very, very hot in this part of the world later on, 29, 30 degrees. It's going to be tough for those at Wimbledon, not just the players, but the spectators as well. We wish you well. Just a reminder that we're streaming live on YouTube and your smart TV. So many of you come up to me in the street in London, especially in the centre of London where I live, and say you watch the show every morning, and we're delighted about this. And there's no better moment to be watching as well as listening, because the two of us is about to become the three of us, and an extremely significant gentleman has joined us in studio this morning. Let me explain a bit more at this stage. Over the last couple of months, the issue of whether or not it will be Lyon or Crystal Palace competing in the Europa League next season has been in question, stemming from John Textor's involvement in both clubs, conflicting with UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. In a bid to satisfy the situation, Textor has since sold his Palace shares to the New York Jets owner, the very wealthy Woody Johnson, while he stepped down as president of Lyon. But both these moves came after UEFA's March 1 deadline regarding multi-club rules. Last week, UEFA confirmed they were postponing their decision on whether or not Palace can play in the Europa League next season until the outcome of Lyon's appeal over their domestic relegation is reached. If Lyon won their appeal and were restored to Ligue 1, Palace, could face demotion from the Europa League to the Europa Conference League. Now, that was the news Palace fans were dreading. The news came through yesterday that Lyon's appeal was successful and their relegation was rescinded. As a result, Palace faced demotion to the Conference League, with Nottingham Forest now expected to replace them in the Europa League for the upcoming season. The man at the centre of it all, the co-owner, up until recently, the co-owner of Crystal Palace, but the owner of Eagle Football Holdings, John Textor, has come hot foot from France just for us this morning and joined Simon and myself live in studio. John, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I recognise you right away.
Yeah, well, me too. Why do you get a headset and we don't get headsets? I don't understand.
That is a very good question. This man chooses not to use one. Well, there is one in front of you if you want to wear it. But
well, I might go to this at some point because it looks like you've got more happening. But
what I can tell you is I can hear the producer look through it.
I don't want to hear that. So I just want to listen to hear that.
Okay. That's why I don't wear them, mate.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming, and I really do mean that.
A lot. I love the show.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that greatly. I saw you the other night when Botafogo won a match over in the US, and you were beyond yourself with excitement.
PSG, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was against PSG. I do know that you and Simon have been texting each other, and that Mr. Jordan to my left here, who plays such an integral part in the show every day, he's the man who said, John, come in and speak, because the Palace fans will be listening in numbers. Your group, John, Eagle Football Holdings, acquires a controlling stake in Lyon back in 2022. So 3 years later, how does the club find itself in a position where it's relegated for financial issues?
Well, let me take that on. I object to that characterization. I think people have to understand the DNCG. Like, you've never seen a situation where a club goes into a hearing and it's got significant cash on hand, significant cash flow coming in. It's actually even projecting that it's got another couple $100 million coming in from the sale of Palace. How does a club like that get relegated for sustainability purposes? And in the same week, we passed through the sustainability review of UEFA, which is quite comprehensive, extremely professional. And the answer is the process at the DNCG is very subjective. It's not black and white. They will literally take your player revenues, transfer revenues, and say, well, that needs to count for zero. Well, we do $100 million a year in player sales. Well, under their model of sustainability, they have to project forward as if you have no player sales. We had a $70 million contract from a forward sale of an intangible asset. They didn't really like that deal. They said $70 million, toss it out. $100 million of player sales, toss it out.
But there was a suggestion
$10 million a month from our multi-club cash flows that comes from Botafogo and other places. 130 into OL over the last 12 months, and toss it out.
Now, you mentioned Botafogo in Brazil. There was a suggestion you were going to take funds from Botafogo and stick them into Lyon to satisfy the French authorities.
Well, it goes both ways. So we had a shareholder. We had cash pooling between our clubs is very unique. So yes, that's true. Over the last 12 months, 125 million has flowed from other clubs at Eagle Football into OL. 65 million has gone back. And so we share cash and we deal with counter seasonality to our benefit. When you go to the DNCG, they say, take that 10 million a month, call it zero. Take your player sales, call it zero. Take this $70 million forward sale, call it zero. If you take 300 million out of our cash flows and say, well, are you sustainable? Well, obviously in that academic scenario, no. So I think the point of the DNCG is we don't have anything like this in the Premier League. We have black and white rules. If you lose 105 million pounds over 3 years, you're docked points. If you go into administration, you're docked points. It does not work that way in France. It's very subjective, and they decide what they like, don't like, and you've got to please them. Those are the rules, and I've been fighting with the DNCG and trying to reform them, and so maybe I'm not the best guy to present to them, which is why Michel is much better in leadership in that position than I am.
So do you think, John, you were unfairly targeted at Lyon?
Not targeted. I guess I'm really getting to the point is that their model says, run your club as a standalone and show us you have this wheelbarrow full of cash at the beginning of the season, because we're going to say, they literally said the rule is you cannot project player sales as part of your business. Now, that works well for a simple club that has player trading, because often that's a wash, right? Mm-hmm. You make money, you lose money. But what if you're the third most successful academy in Europe behind Real Madrid and Barcelona, and you do 100 million euros a year, and that's a recurring business segment, and they're going to judge your sustainability and say, well, count your revenues as zero.
But it's not unreasonable, though, John, and to some extent, is it? Because forward projecting for things that you don't know you can guarantee are going to happen, we can all project for things. We can project for cup runs, we can project for winning tournaments, we can project for player transfers. But if these things don't realise themselves because someone doesn't want to buy your players or you don't achieve something in a competition, then there is an element of accountancy that says, well, you can't project for that because it's not a guaranteed revenue stream. So there is some degree of...
there's no basis for that in accounting. It's against accounting principles.
Really?
On the football side, we're not talking about player trading. You can't count on that.
Yeah,
buying and selling.
But you said there's 100 million of your...
Yeah, but you have a separate business segment, which is like you're producing ice cream.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a going concern calculation, you look forward in 12 months and you project your revenues.
Sure.
Because they've been the same every year for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So that side of Lyon's business, the academy, produces 100 million a year every year. Look at the financials. So you can't say that entire segment has to be zero revenue.
Be discounted, yeah. Because what we were hearing, and some of the things we were hearing, we had various journalists from France that I thought were a little bit hysterical at the time. I said they were hysterical, they didn't like it. But they were talking about things like the debt level, that when the club was bought, it had very little debt. And now that you've got it, it's got loads of debt. And by the way, you've sold off all the assets, like the basketball club and stuff like that. And by the way, also, you can't meet your obligations to Burnley. You can't even pay transfer fees to Burnley, and UEFA have sanctioned you for it. Those sort of things were reverberating around.
Well, Botafogo is very different than OL. In terms of OL, the debt has hardly gone up since we bought it. We have a stadium. We had to refinance probably 400 million of debt.
Yeah.
Stadium's worth 800. There's debt of about 400 million euros.
I've understood that, yeah.
Yeah. We refinanced that, lowered the interest rate. We have a BBB+ rating.
Yeah.
that was reaffirmed. So when they're talking about sustainability, but the credit rating agencies are saying you're investment grade. I mean, that's, first of all, something to pay attention to.
So was the issue you, John?
When they say has debt gone up? No, the shareholder debt has gone up because I loaned about 40-50 million in. That level's now about 20.
Yeah.
But no, debt hasn't gone up.
Was the issue you? Because the optics have changed.
I think so.
You've stepped out of the situation. The same things have been presented back to them.
I think I'm very much the issue. Like, I'm attempting to be an agent of change. I think the governance in France is not working. We're trying to bring a Premier League model in where every club has a vote. It hasn't been done that way previously. The league is constantly being accused of corruption. There was just a claim against the president. The French Football Federation is trying to take over, which is a huge mistake. And I show up and we have a bunch of panels and I say, I'm literally challenging the existence of the DNCG and whether or not they should exist. So if I'm talking about a new model, a reformist model where there is no DNCG, but there are black and white rules like we have in the Premier League, I'm probably not the best guy to go in front of that same DNCG and ask their support. So, yeah, the problem's me.
Right.
I was a disruptor, a reformist. Yeah, the cowboy hat was funny, but not to them. Nasser liked it, thought it was funny. He and I are getting along very well, but no, I don't work very well in the governing model of France, and that's the big reason for the change.
Nasser Al-Khelaifi, of course, flying at the moment with PSG in the final on
great.
Sunday.
He's only lost one game in this whole 10-game stretch. And,
amazing.
We know
you know that was coming, right?
I want to put this to you because we want to get to the Crystal Palace aspect of this as and when we can, because Palace fans, and I'm judging by the messages I'm seeing coming in, are listening to your every word. Can you categorically, John, say that Eagle Football Holdings, your company, is in a positive place financially? Supposed confidential detail from the sale of your Palace shares have found their way into the Telegraph, the sport section of the Telegraph this morning. Any idea how that happened?
I have no idea what the article is, but happy if you tell me what it is.
The report suggests that Eagle Football Holdings has $1.2 billion plus debts, according to confidential documents. What do you say to that?
I mean, they're not really...
And how's it found out? Who's leaked it?
Oh, I have no idea, but we put our numbers out. We just filed with the SEC for a public offering. That was a confidential filing, but everybody has our numbers.
What is the number, John, of the debt?
The number of debt, well, you've got to add it up across the clubs. We have an $800 million stadium in France, so we have $430 million of debt just on that alone. We have operating debt down at Botafogo. We have debt on our books that is non-recourse to us. It's actually the social club debt, where we pay 6% of our revenues off to them. From a recording standpoint, that debt shows on our books, but it's non-recourse to us. So they're just... Yeah, I'm sure that number's probably correct, but what of it? We've got clubs that are immensely valuable. We have assets and stadiums that are immensely valuable. And, we have significant operating cash flow down in Brazil. We've gone from 20 million in revenues to 200 million in revenues in 3 years. We'll do 115 million of operating cash flow in Brazil. We've gone from bankrupt and 3 players and no staff 3 years ago to champions of Brazil, champions of South America, and yes, we had a good win in the Club World Cup. So
how would you describe Eagle Football Holdings' financial condition this morning?
If we weren't proud of our financial condition and if we weren't sound, UBS wouldn't have decided to be our lead underwriter in the IPO. So we wouldn't have a BBB plus credit rating in our club in France. Like, you just throw around numbers as if they're big numbers where you don't really think about the assets. Our debt, that debt number probably also counts player debt, and our squad value has gone up massively and far exceeds our player debt. So,
right.
Yeah, like, these are numbers. They sound big, but the clubs are big.
Of course. John, we'll carry on after a short break. And for Palace fans, we're going to get into it now. The likelihood or otherwise of Palace playing in the Europa Conference League, but they really should be playing in the Europa League. We'll get to that shortly. John Textor is live with Simon and myself on talkSPORT, courtesy of Selco, where the trade goes. Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday morning, but not any normal Thursday morning, because the man at the eye of this financial storm, involving Crystal Palace, involving Olympique Lyon, involving UEFA, John Textor, hugely successful US businessman, has joined Simon and myself live in studio this morning as we go through what could happen next regarding Crystal Palace, who won the FA Cup but are now waiting somewhat on tenterhooks to find out if it's going to be Europa League football for them, as it should be, or if it's going to be Europa Conference League. Crystal Palace likely to be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon will be in the Europa League, but the FA Cup winners Palace will not be, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. John here in studio makes no bones about it. He had a huge financial interest in Crystal Palace. He owns Olympique Lyon and he owns Botafogo in Brazil. And if that's not multi-club ownership, I don't know what is. John, what decision do you believe UEFA will take regarding Crystal Palace and their participation in the Europa League?
I'm glad you asked, because I was about to disagree with the premise. A moment ago you said they would be demoted to the Conference League.
Well, they could be.
Yeah, I know, but I am dumb enough and successful enough to not sort of predict in advance what a governing body is going to say. At times, I've been so confident at how we would come out of a hearing with the DNCG or with UEFA. So just never, ever, ever try and predict what they're going to do. I think it's insulting to them. I think they deserve to make a decision, and I don't want to prejudge it. But what do I think will happen? I think this talk of trust is only if you have decisive influence. Like, why should I put my interest in trust back before March when the rule says you only have to do it if you have decisive influence? I don't. If I had decisive influence, then those Brazilian players that just beat PSG in the Club World Cup, half of them would be coming to Crystal Palace next year. But you don't see one single player from our network of clubs that's made its way onto the Palace roster, which is the source of my frustration with the lack of collaboration that we've been able to have with Crystal Palace.
So what was your influence at Selhurst Park?
I help a lot, right? I showed up during COVID. I paid off COVID debt. I helped finish the academy. The Capital, I'm sitting there on the board with 4 other guys. You know, Paris is making the decisions. He's bringing us players. You know, he involves us, but he doesn't really listen to us. You know, he does, but you know, a suggestion from time to time is not the same as decisive influence.
Did you ever say in the appointment of Oliver Glasner?
No, I tried to hire him in Lyon. And if Dougie Friedman notices and he goes to visit him in Salzburg just the way I did, and he ends up at Crystal Palace, is there a connection, you know, there? I don't know. Steve's not going to be told who hires a coach. So, but go back to this point. Like, we are the most collaborative multi-club, I think, on the planet. We've got 40 or so trades between our clubs in just the last 18 months, and there's not one Eagle player that ended up at Palace. And I'm telling you, if you look at the way we assembled that Botafogo squad, second division out of Japan, second division out of Paraguay, paying guys for $2 and $3 million, and they just stood. I mean, I think we're the only guys to not yield a goal. I don't know. I'm going to get this backwards. I think we're the only team that scored on PSG during the Club World Cup, and we're probably the only team where they haven't yielded a goal. Those players would be at Palace if I had anything to do with it.
I get the gist of what you're saying.
So I don't have decisive influence. I shouldn't have put my shares in a trust. And I think UEFA has some safe harbor to say that.
But was it something that was discussed amongst you, Parish, and the other members, whether it was Josh or David, about the potential exposure? You bought into Palace in 2021, bought by 43%. I think you wanted to buy more. You end up buying 43%. You end up then in a situation where COVID comes along. Some of that money would have funded COVID, I suspect. Some of that money would have gone into the shareholders' pockets. Right? But you then go and buy Lyon post the Palace transaction.
Yeah.
Right? So that puts in a situation where you've got a multi-club situation. If Palace are ever successful, there might be a jeopardy. Was it never discussed in amongst you guys at Palace to say, potentially, specifically now, when you're going on a cup run, we might find ourselves in a situation where we've got jeopardy here? Was it that never discussed between you guys?
It was not. And I think the reasons are in documents that the public hasn't seen. Number one, we shouldn't talk about whether or not I have 43% vote or whether I have a 25% vote. We should talk about zero.
Yeah.
Because the document that I signed, when I signed onto the shares, says clearly I'm not entitled to have any role in management decisions. So when you look at the UEFA rule...
Which UEFA have seen.
Yeah, they've seen that document. And I sat there in the room and said, okay, stop talking about the 25%. And we're using that argument because it's below the UEFA threshold of 30.
So was it universally accepted amongst you 4 boys that the situation?
No, it just wasn't discussed. Number one, when the memo came out, they changed the rule at UEFA this particular year. They moved up the date
to
March 1st, but they didn't actually make that official, I think, until the last week of February. So when they sent out the memo sort of warning everybody that, you should take a look at your multi-club problem, one, nobody saw the memo. It goes to your inbox at info@cpfc.com or something. But at that time, I think Palace was sitting in the relegation zone.
Okay, let me take.
And then we do a cup run.
Yeah.
But the point is, my document says I have 0% votes. Why would that be a problem?
If you'd have run that past council, just hypothetically, legal representation, and gone, this is my documentation. This is what UEFA's rules say. Am I got any jeopardy? I'm assuming you didn't do that. But if the situation was that the rule wasn't moved back from June, would you have been minded if Parish or the other board members had come to you and said to you, John, we got a problem here, and we need you to put these shares into blind trust? Would you have done it?
Of course I would have. I mean, if they'd have said, well, look, if you read the rule, clearly we shouldn't have put it in trust. I don't have decisive influence.
Right.
Secondly, if they say,
to get belt and braces,
in the abundance of caution, John, you should do the following, I would have gladly done it, because the fact is, I don't really have a vote at Palace anyway.
Right. And that wouldn't have stopped you, because the other argument people would say is, hang on, John, you're about to do an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. Do you really want to have your shares in a influential Crystal Palace, but not a controlling influence Crystal Palace, but notwithstanding it's still an economic value, and you can't parlay that into your stock?
It's irrelevant to our IPO for a reason. If you own a minority interest in a club or a business, it does not consolidate into your revenues and your expenses. It just sits here on your balance sheet as an asset at value. So it really doesn't matter if we're voting or we're involved at that point. It's what is it worth? It's on the balance sheet. It's like a piece of real estate, really. I mean, it's not part of our operating model at Eagle Football, and it's not part of our story to say we're running it. So it wouldn't have mattered.
But John, Simon's got more than a point here. To me, and you guys are in a different stratosphere to me in terms of your knowledge. You're very like-minded. But when all's said and done, when there was the slightest thought that there could be jeopardy on the horizon, you guys should have acted on it. You should have acted on it. Especially when Crystal Palace got to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. The semi-final of the FA Cup. My God, they've made the final. You might just win this thing, and you did. Which begs this question: How much responsibility do you take personally if Palace are demoted from the Europa League?
Well, I think we all do as owners, but
no, you.
Oh, me. Well, look, I'll admit to not even thinking about the issue. Of course, I have to, but I also read the rule. So please read the rule yourself. Like, everybody's talking about it like it's so obvious. The rule's very clear. If you have decisive influence, you may need to consider this. I don't. I didn't. If I had decisive influence, I wouldn't have been trying to sell the club starting in June of 2024. And if UEFA wants to look what they're doing, if you have a multi-club problem, they say, well, sell off your interest or get out of governance. Well, I did. I hired an investment bank. I was already out.
So if that evidence is so clear, why are UEFA dragging their feet on this?
One, I don't think they're dragging their feet. Two, I think they have safe harbor in this issue of decisive influence. But given the situation that Lyon was in, a possible relegation, why would they start this whole debate of people applying for appeal and stuff if they didn't have to? The draw isn't until, I don't know, when, August? They have time. Yeah. Now, it feels like they're dragging their feet because we as fans, we want to know. We want our team in.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think they were shocked as anybody. UEFA approved Lyon through a rigorous financial sustainability review. Why would they think the DNCG would suddenly have a problem with that same issue? But when suddenly the DNCG did, they said, wait, we don't necessarily have to make a decision on Palace. Let's just, hold off.
Listen, you being here this morning are giving us a unique insight, John, into what is going on, the component parts of all of this. You're centrally key to it all. You and Steve Parish have lobbied UEFA regarding your previous stake in the club and the issue of decisive influence. What feeling did you get when you were sitting in front of UEFA? Did you think these guys are going to go with me where I want them to go to, and Palace are going to be fine and they're going to play in the Europa League? Was that the feeling you got, or did you honestly think, we're not getting anywhere here? We're looking at Europa Conference League.
They don't show you their cards in the meeting, and they're thinking about a lot more than just the situation, because they're thinking about precedent. They're thinking about, well, this is the rule, this is the timing. We need everybody to sort of things have to be consistently applied from top division to lower divisions. And so they don't tell you much. They like it when it's won on the field. I can tell you that. They've told me that. They hate being in this position where the rules end up getting in the way of the sporting results. And for that same reason, I know Crystal Palace fans may have been rooting for OL, not to make it in the Europa League, but OL won it on the field. And it was an off-the-pitch issue, which created a challenge for there.
Do you feel there's an element of painting you as a villain in this situation? Do you feel that? What's your reaction to that? If you haven't got decisive influence, I've made this argument on your behalf, and people think I'm shilling for you, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Right? That if you haven't got decisive influence, the person that has got decisive influence has the responsibility to make sure there's no jeopardy attached to the transactions they've entered into. You're getting painted to some extent as the problem. So how does that play with you?
One, I don't care. It's like if you get into this and you're worried about what people think of you, there's 10% of the fans that always hate you. I work for the anonymous fan that knows that I help. I showed up, I paid off debt, I helped the academy, as part of a number of owners. Like, we all worked pretty well to improve the squad. Now we're actually fighting for cups, albeit one out of every 135 years in the format that we earned it. But I think that the smart Crystal Palace fan knows that I'm a guy who showed up and helped. I think that the people on social media and people angry, and I think it's ironic that, just for a single tournament, they want to take a guy that's helped and say, well, it'd be great if he left, because what does that bring next year? At Eagle Football, we have an ambition to get to Europa League every year. Look what we did in Brazil with a bankrupt club and no athletes, right? Those athletes all want to get to Palace.
I know, but John, it comes down to this. With due respect, you're always going to be looked upon by Palace fans, God forbid, but it could well happen, and it looks like happening, as the man who took Crystal Palace out the Europa League and put them in the Europa Conference League.
I honestly don't think that's true. I meet a lot.
What other way is there to look at it?
I meet a lot of Crystal Palace fans.
Who's it on? You or Steve Parrish?
No, you make it sound like that. I meet a lot of Crystal Palace fans that walk up to me and thank me for my contribution. Like, not everybody's cut from the same cloth. And if I woke up every day worrying about the people that are on, social media, that are angry, that are like, oh my God, this guy's getting in the way. Like, are there people that are literally sitting there thinking, gee, I wish John Textor had not come along at Palace? They know what contribution I made. I think the rules are ridiculous, that you would have rules. They should put guardrails around the competition to keep the competition fair and just deal with it on roster management. They do it in youth football. We have a roster freeze in youth football. Why can't they do it here?
But, John, the rules are the rules.
The rules...
And be honest with me now.
The rules changed. The rules changed in the middle of this year.
Right, I get that.
Well, that's not cool.
But more recently, when the Crystal Palace captain lifted the FA Cup above his head and you're applauding, was a part of you that thought, oh, God.
Oh, shit, is what I thought. Am I allowed to say that?
Who said it?
God. Yeah, no, I didn't. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy.
I just apologise for your language there, John. We've kept that. But
gosh, I'm so sorry.
But we understand your emotion.
Yeah, no, I was...
you thought,
I was very happy.
God.
No, I was very happy, but I felt the gravity to it, and I was concerned, of course.
On the same day?
Holding the cup next to the Prince. Yeah, it was a great, great moment. And I couldn't have been happier. I couldn't have been happier for the fans. But yeah, I was worried about what was coming.
There and then, you're holding the FA Cup beside the Prince. And
no, that was Josh. Josh took the spot next to the Prince.
But there's trouble on the horizon here.
Yeah, but listen, look, I think
you've just said it.
Well, no, I felt bad, but it doesn't mean I had decisive influence. So the rules say they should be in. Look at the rule. Stop saying this is the guy or that's the man or he should have done whatever. The rule says if you have decisive influence, you need to go the trust route, or you need to find a way to mitigate
John,
the risk.
you know you're the guy, because if you didn't appreciate that you're the guy at the heart of all this, you wouldn't be sitting in studio with Simon and me this morning.
I'm
live
here because
talk
he
sport.
Invited me.
I get that.
Yeah.
But why did he invite you?
I'm not going to speak for him. It was a conversation last night.
I get it. And Simon's invitation, we were delighted when you accepted it. But you've just said it. When you held the FA Cup, you thought, geez, it could be a problem.
But we also have to frame the conversation differently. He can't say this, and I'm not here to say it for him, but I will in this instance, because I think some of the governance and some of the rules that are structured in football are absolutely absurd. This is stupid from UEFA. This is a stupid set of governance, a stupid set of rules. If you don't want multi-club ownership, then don't allow it in the first place. But put rails around it, put situations around it. If you want to keep it on the field, keep it on the field. If you've got documentation that details that the construct of a shareholders agreement or the principles of which they operate shows no decisive influence, then ignore the shareholding and look at the reality of what you're staring at. UEFA are stupid, and some of the governance in football, from PSR in the Premier League, which you might talk about if you want to ask him about that later on in the show, and other things, these guys have to tread carefully. I didn't tread carefully when I was in football, which made my problems get compounded, and I don't have to tread carefully now because I can call it as I see it. This is stupid governance from UEFA. Palace should be in the Europa League. His financial contribution enabled Palace to sail through choppy waters, and I don't think it's right, whether he's here or not, and people think I'm being sycophantic, that he catches all the crap that's going, because I do think other people are part of the structure of that football club that creates a problem. And UEFA should be doing what they should be doing, which is allowing Palace to play in this competition.
John, stay with us. John, what we will do, commercial station, we'll hop out and hop back in again. Stay with us.
Great.
Plays that villain role very well now. That's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
Wow, what a discussion we're having this morning. Crystal Palace likely to be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France saw Lyon's relegation to league rescinded. I've got to... John Textor has asked me, why is he saying it again? You don't think it's likely? I hope it doesn't happen. Obviously, I hope it doesn't happen. You for sure hope it doesn't happen, John. But I've got to readdress it and just paint the picture again. As it stands, Lyon will be in the Europa League. But FA Cup winners Palace might not be, which isn't wrong, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. And John Textor, the man in the middle of all of this, whether you like it or not, John, is live in studio with Simon and myself. I just want to underline something. You've come in here and with the best will in the world, you're speaking so openly and honestly, and I do really appreciate that. We might take some calls on this. During the last break, I asked John, would you be happy enough if a couple of Palace fans join us? Oh, you always love coming on and joining Simon when he's on with me, and he's on with me 4 mornings a week. Well, John Textor is with Simon and myself. And yes, John would take a couple of calls. 03717 223344. You sold your stake, John, to Woody Johnson of the New York Jets in a bid to satisfy the multi-club ownership rules. How will you feel if that's all for nothing in the end?
Yeah, no, it would upset me. I mean, just a couple of weeks before the FA Cup final, shareholders were talking about, how long they want to stay in. Should we build the stand? Who's in for the long haul? Certainly we are. I felt it highly probable based on their intentions, what I knew of them, our documents that gave us the right of first offer should anybody decide to sell. When you're sitting there at 43%, you're going to get to 51% soon. You're going to get to 60%. Then the type of collaboration and roster optimization that we do between our club in Brazil and Europe. I think we had a plan to get back to Europa League every other year, not just once in every 100 years. So 2 weeks before the FA Cup, I thought we were finally going to be the majority owner and fans would get to know our model over time. They'd get to know me because they just knew me as this guy that showed up at games. So I went from thinking that I was really going to be able to express my love for Crystal Palace more functionally to realizing when I said, oh, blank at that moment, is that I knew I had to leave. That stinks.
So how's it been left with Steve Parish and the rest of them at Crystal Palace? Are you in talking terms? Yeah, no, for him it's a stay of execution because I think his club was going to be sold to us. He loves the club. He'll probably want to stay there forever. And this obviously strengthened him in that position and good for him. I hope they get to Europa League. I hope he has a strategy to get back there because the changes I see in the club, everybody's gone. The top sporting guy's gone. Top managers are gone. And they're in a tournament, but what's their strategy next year? Do you think Steve Parish can match your ambition? No, I think his ambition every year is to avoid relegation. Our ambition is to climb the table. Who thought we could go from bankruptcy to winning South America in 2.5 years down there? I mean, that was crazy. We had an expression down in Brazil, it only happens to Botafogo, and that was a description of the incredible ways we would lose. Now that expression means you take a red card in the first minute in the final Libertadores and you still win 10 against 11. So we have that ambition to climb to the top of the table. I took them from relegation, 7 points after 14 rounds in France, and in one half of the season, we were the best team in France, and we got to Europa League. And we damn near got to the semifinals with that team. So because of UEFA's multi-club rules... With Crystal Palace, I would have that same ambition. Right. So I was just about to say that. Palace are going to miss out because you wanted to be the man who owned the football club. But because of multi-club ownership rules... I never want to be the man. Ask the guy that drives the red Ferrari that. I'm not that guy. So what did you want to be at Palace? You just said you want to be... I'm an organizational guy. I think an organization works together. We're incredibly collaborative. Ask anybody. We're a family at Eagle Football. So when people say things, I know you're just being quick there. I wanted to be the man. I don't wake up wanting to be the man. But I do love the family of Eagle Football. I think collaboration between clubs and communities is a good thing. Otherwise, we're just watching Petro clubs win everything, right? So your target and Parish's target were different for Crystal Palace. He wants to avoid relegation every year. If there's a chance to sort of climb up the table and he can do it, he would. But we have a plan to do it every year. Collaboratively, how did that work then? You're poles apart.
No, it's his club to run. Like when I came in, I was negotiating to buy 75%. All the contracts said you're getting 75%. And, they came to me at the 11th hour before the transfer window and said, hey, we can get you approved faster if you just buy a minority now. Come back in a few weeks and buy the rest. Yeah, they're all tired of hearing me tell the story internally. But yeah, we thought we were going to have 75% of Palace, not 40%. My mistake. I did it. I closed, ended up being in the minority. And when I realized I couldn't influence anything, I started seeking fulfillment in football elsewhere. That's why I bought.
Did they renege on what you wanted? Your original offer?
I think the documents speak for themselves. They all said 75%. I was persuaded to close on a minority because that would be quicker to get approval. And we wanted to help that transfer window. It's the timing of my closing. In the end, I think that was wrong. I think that the owners and directors test works the same way, whether you're going for 90% or 20%. So yeah, I think I made a mistake, bought the minority, ended up in a position where I had a lot of capital invested in something I couldn't influence.
So for want of a better word, do you feel that you and your intentions at Crystal Palace ended up being screwed by the people who were there?
We ended up making an investment that ended up being profitable for us and not as enjoyable either personally or for our total business as it should have been. But I don't use words like I got screwed. If it was my decision to buy the minority interest, I have myself to blame.
We're going to get into some wider aspects in football and club ownership and the finances of it all. But John, this is unbelievable this morning. Just listening to in your intentions and what you wanted to achieve. We'll get into more of that. And remember, Palace fans, this is a man who's given up his time to be with Simon and myself this morning, because this is a hot subject, the hottest subject at the moment in football. If you want, we could bring you to air and you can make a brief point. You've heard how John approached what he thought his role was going to be at Crystal Palace and what his intentions were. And his intentions clearly were only good for the football club. 03717 223344. It's 11 o'clock.
Four headlines, all involving the number 4. We start with the Lionesses' 4-0 win as they ran riot against the Netherlands to restore order to their Euros title defence. A brace from Lauren James and goals from Georgia Stanway and Ella Toone means a win against Wales will be enough to send them through to the quarters. But after such a poor showing against France, what changed?
I think today our decision-making on the ball was good. We created a lot of chances, and also the way the Netherlands played, we could exploit spaces they left behind because they, of course, they also want to press high, but they couldn't get they couldn't get their press on us, also because of our decision making, I think.
PSG demolished Real Madrid 4-0 to reach the Club World Cup final. Dean Ashton says the Parisians are on a different plane to everyone else at the minute.
They let them off in the second half, really, but even then they could have had 2 or 3. It just shows when you get that team ethic and combine it with, you know, world-class talent, then you can do very, very well.
They'll take on Chelsea in the Club World Cup final, which will be live on talkSPORT Sunday evening. The 4-year wait for Jofra Archer to be back in England's Test whites ends today. He returns to the home of cricket up against Jasprit Bumrah with the series on an absolute knife edge. And his Sussex coach Paul Farbrace told talkSPORT now is the right time to bring him back after all of those injuries.
There are risks to anybody taking the field, but there's risks to crossing the road. So, you know, if you stop doing it, you wouldn't take a risk at all. So the bloke's raring to go. He's a game changer, and you can hear from Ben Stokes there. He's absolutely excited to have him back in.
Buzzing.
And we're into the final 4 of Wimbledon now. Novak Djokovic will meet world number 1 Jannik Sinner after getting through his quarter-final match last night. But there is concerns over how fit he'll be after suffering a nasty fall on centre court.
The real impact or effect of what happened, I will feel tomorrow. So let's see. I'm hoping the next 24 to 48 hours that the severity of, you know, what was happening on the court and what happened is not too bad. That I'll be able to play it, you know, at my best and free of pain in 2 days.
For all the latest news, head to the website at talksport.com.
Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning, Thursday, July the 10th. It's Jim White and Simon Jordan. We are live on talkSPORT. We're also streaming live on YouTube and your smart TV. So many of you getting in touch this morning. 03717 223344 81089. We will be taking some calls at some stage very soon. I'm going to have to go into the explainer, as we call it, again. Sitting opposite me is US businessman John Textor. Hugely successful he is as well. But Crystal Palace, whether John likes it or not, could well be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France, I'm looking at you, saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon, John owns Lyon, will be in the Europa League, but the FA Cup winners Crystal Palace will not be due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. And that centres specifically on John Textor's involvement with both clubs. And that's why we're talking about it this morning. Multi-club ownership, the model. John, again, I stress, I want to thank you for coming hot from the Eurostar and joining Simon and myself live in the show. Your company, Eagle Football Holdings, at one point had Palace, Lyon, Botafogo and Molenbeek in Belgium. They're all in your portfolio, or at least they all were. But with the rules as they are, what is the point of multi-club ownership when it gets to a situation like this?
Well, I mean, certainly across continent, you don't have those conflicts. And, you know, there's a player migration thing that happens that we have nothing to do with. Water flows where it must, and players want to go where they want. And if you're in South America, you can have a lot of fulfillment staying there and playing there, but many of those players want to get to Europe. You know, the best managed league in the world is the Premier League, best TV contract, greatest visibility. So you can do a lot before you even get into these European conflicts. I think when I got into it, I was so sure that it would be so long before Palace was in the situation that the evolution of the rules is happening very quickly. UEFA is trying to address this. So many clubs are owned by multi-clubs. There are a lot of benefits. It's not just a business strategy. It's a collaboration strategy. I honestly thought they'd fix it before I had a problem. And, you know, that's an apology to Crystal Palace fans because, you know, I just never contemplated this would happen this quickly. And I'm not running Crystal Palace. I'm not paying attention to it, as much as I might have were we in a majority position. And then this conflict happens, and it's like lightning striking, and suddenly we beat Manchester City in the FA Cup final, and it's a horrible situation.
I mean, you never saw it coming.
UEFA have got to. It's muddled thinking, and in defence of Steve Parish,
but those are the rules.
But in defence of but they're kind of
evolving rules.
They're kind of not. They've got to define what decisive control is. They can't just pick a random number of how many shares you have in a business and suggest that that's decisive control.
Yeah.
If you've got supporting documentation that illustrates that the actual executive running of a football club is based upon this construct, then they've got to define more clearer what is decisive ownership, what is decisive influence, because that is the point that everyone is arguing about.
They're trying, and it is evolving, and this multi-club thing is also becoming more and more, popular.
More de rigueur, yeah.
And, I think they look at it and say, okay, 30%, if a guy's got 30% money in, well, he must have influence. But my document says no influence. I mean, so case by case you have to look at it. And I think in our case they did. They studied it seriously, and the only reason they're waiting is obviously because of the Lyon situation. But I think they have safe harbor in the fact that I have no decisive influence, that my document is very clear that I'm not allowed to have a vote or any involvement, and it is what it is. I think they have to go not only by their rules, but by our documents.
Nonetheless, you've sold your stake to Woody Johnson of the New York Jets.
Of course. Yeah,
so
by the way,
at this
by the way, on that ambition thing, I was a little hard on Steve. I think Woody's going to be a very good owner. I think he's got ambition. I think that coming into my situation, he's got a lot of energy. I think the taste of this FA Cup, I think the owners now, I think they're going to want Europe every year. So let me qualify what I said earlier. It has been relegation and survival for so long. So let's see if this inflection point of ambition does something permanent.
But you're now out of Palace.
Honestly, I don't know if it's closed yet. Is it closed?
Is it? Well, I don't know. Is it? Is it officially that you've sold to Johnson of the Jets?
I think it's subject only to Premier League approval, and so it's a firm contract. I'm sure it's 100% because
you don't see any issues.
No, he's Woody Johnson, for Christ's sake.
If you had the money.
Well, not only that, he's a really good guy. He was I guess, ambassador to the UK. We're all using his baby powder and his shampoo and his Q-tips. So, what could be wrong with that? It's not like he's been running guns or anything.
So, as he buys into Palace and you're out, I'm going to ask you.
The way you say that's so hurtful.
Are you going to try and buy another English club?
Well, first of all, my kids are huge Palace fans. Like, one of my kids was, I think, actually hung off of a bridge by Nottingham Forest fans when he went to a away match, and he's had as many beers with, the Holmesdale Fanatics as anybody. But, and they're older now. But yeah, of course. I mean, I'm a big Anglophile when it comes to football. My great-grandfather was English. I think my first game was Stockport County. My second game was Leyton Orient. Like, I don't know. I have friends that grew up rooting for Aston Villa. I had a pastor that was a Wolves fan. Like, I didn't go to my first Premier League game until I was much, much older. So I saw the raw side of English football for a long time. And
you love English football?
I do. I mean, I really like a championship-level club more than I like Premier League clubs. I mean,
have you got your own one?
I'm not going to say it publicly because, they're owned by people. But, yeah, I've got my favorite clubs. I don't have a right to just, throw their name into a ridiculous discussion of what I'm doing next. But, yeah, I mean,
But if that's your intention, it's your intention. It's not ridiculous. Are you looking at Sheffield Wednesday?
Look, I think, Sheffield Wednesday to me is the example of what's wrong with English football because they should still have a chance at winning a championship every year, and they don't, right? So this when we say, Manchester City, they had this historic win. Well, no, they're not really historic when you have that kind of advantage. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see the rules allow a Sheffield Wednesday to, win the Premier League again. I don't know if that day will ever happen, but.
And on that point, John, it's such a good point you make. It's not a level playing field any longer, is it? We've got nation states owning football clubs.
Yeah, and this is why multi-clubs. This is why
you guys still want an involvement.
This is why multi-clubs aren't a bad thing. I mean, what's great about our multi-club is that we see talent all over the world. We collaborate actively. We do all the things between our other clubs that we have not been doing with Palace, the kind of things that would drive UEFA crazy. Like, we don't sign a player at Botafogo unless the people at Lyon would want him on their squad. Now, we only have 4 players internationally can play in Lyon, so that's not really as much of a two-way traffic zone as you think. But we really get into the level of collaboration. Collaboration is the way you compete with unlimited money. If I can find 11 players in the dark corners of this world that are better than the players you can buy, we saw that on the pitch in Los Angeles against PSG.
Yeah.
Right? And look how that team was built.
Sure. We're going to take a brief break, John, and we might take two or three calls. I'm looking at the switchboard. As we get to the break, and you are opening up, and I'm asking questions and you are answering them, and I really do thank you for that. Were you totally serious about your bid for Everton? We know the Friedkin Group now have it.
Totally serious. First of all, I didn't do that stupid interview on Sky News on a whim. The owner of Everton at that time called me and said, John, the fans really need to understand your strategy. I need you to talk to this guy, Alan Meyer. I'd never known him before. I love him now. He's great.
Alan Meyer is a great guy.
That was like the dumbest interview you could possibly give if you didn't know you were absolutely going to be the owner of the squad. So I absolutely knew we were going to be the owner of the squad. And what turns out is they were running 2 legal teams with a Chinese wall between them and 2 guys to the finish line, and neither one of us knew. I had talked to the Friedkin Group in advance because I knew they had already sort of won that first bid. They had the money on the stadium, and I called and said, I'm not going to go for this if you guys are still interested because it's your deal. I mean, they put the money up for the stadium. They had to be dealt with. Then I get one of those calls like I think it was a Friday. We were waiting on wiring instructions. We didn't understand why they weren't coming. Everything was done, completely done.
You'd bought the club, you thought?
Yeah, and then I get a call over the weekend from one of the owners who said we decided just one of the owners, and we decided to go another direction. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, you literally asked me to roll out and lay out the strategy. Why am I talking about coaching decisions at Everton if I wasn't already the owner? And then
and you'd wired the offer?
No, we were waiting on wiring instructions, but full documents done, everything done, closed, right? And then we get the call. I was in shock. And like, why would you want to buy Everton? Well, one, wanted to buy Crystal Palace. I like to stay at Crystal Palace. I love Crystal Palace, but we're out there and Everton's available. Yeah, it was a great opportunity. Friedkin's guy calls me and says, John, it's like 8 days ago, we just changed our mind. I'm like, really? So.
And they got it and you didn't.
Not only that, but I'm looking forward to meeting Dan because he just bought a house about 6 doors down from mine in Jupiter Island. And apparently we're going to be neighbors. So we'll be able to have a beer over this.
I'd love to eavesdrop that conversation over the garden wall.
I hear he's a super good guy. Yeah. I'm sure he didn't know how close we were. If there was a Chinese wall between us, they weren't aware of what we were doing. It was their club to buy. They'd put up the money. No problem there. We'll have a beer over it. Every time I say I'm going to have a beer with somebody, I find out they don't drink. So I got to stop saying that. But I do.
It's coming over to me that you love Crystal Palace. You've said that umpteen times.
Of course.
Would you love to have an involvement with them again sometime in the future?
We're called Eagle Football Group, right? So of course. Name the whole company after him. Would I love to have an involvement with them again? I'd love to be able to go to games. I'd still like to be known as somebody that helped for a time when they needed it. I'm really proud of the academy. I think South London produces probably 20% of the athletes in the Premier League, and now they have a place where they can play top-level ball and don't have to be sucked away to bigger clubs. But
okay,
yeah,
we'll take a couple of calls the other side of the break, and we'll broaden out the discussion as well. John Textor with Simon and himself live on talkSPORT with Selco, where the trade goes.
plays that villain role very well now. It's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
It's Thursday morning. Jim White, Simon Jordan. We're live in talkSPORT. Just a reminder, we're streaming live on YouTube and your smart TV. For all the information on how to watch the show, just head to talksport.com/watch. We're going to talk about profit and sustainability rules. Yes, PSR. We've had to get used to those initials. Many clubs and many fans of clubs simply bewildered as to why they exist and the implementation of them. We have been and still are in the company of hugely successful US businessman John Textor, who's been telling us there it was his understanding that he'd bought Everton, and that ended up in the hands of the Friedkin Group. But I love the way you said to me moments ago, John, yeah, rear view mirror, we move on. Is that honestly how you guys do it at your level?
Yeah, you have to.
And it's the next opportunity.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be learned from the past, but nothing to be gained staying in the past.
Yeah. John, if you want, you can pop your headphones on because I'm delighted to say...
I get to do it now.
You get to do it now. Many Crystal Palace fans getting in touch. And again, and I don't want to labour the point, but at the moment, Crystal Palace fans are having to get used to the idea that it might be the Europa Conference League and not the Europa League they'll be playing football in next season. They're in Europe, but not maybe in the league they thought they'd be in because they're likely to be demoted to the Conference League because of Lyon.
He keeps saying it.
Because of Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2.
And what happens if they get in the Conference League and they have Brøndby to compare it to? So I don't even know the rule there. I really don't. I'm not just raising that as a controversial issue, but...
Well, who owns Brøndby?
How do you mean?
Blitzer has Brøndby.
Does he? Right. But what's he got? He got 20. What's he got? 25% of Palace.
Okay. Well, the fact of the matter is, Lyon will be in the Europa League, but FA Cup winners Palace at this time will not. That's fair to say, isn't it? That's why we're all here, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. I do hope that changes. John Textor hopes it changes. The man to my left, Simon Jordan, hugely popular with the Palace fans still, one-time owner. Hope it changes. But at the moment, that's a matter of fact, that it's looking like the Europa Conference League. Liam is a big Crystal Palace fan. Liam, you're through to us. Simon is with me, your one-time owner, and John Textor is with me. What do you want to say, Liam? Good morning.
Good morning, all. Yeah, look, I think I speak on behalf of all Palace fans where this is all extremely frustrating, to be honest. Obviously, best day in the club's history, winning the FA Cup, everyone excited for, European tours and all that kind of stuff. And obviously this has kind of clouded it a little bit, being honest. Obviously, no one will ever take away that day, but I think, yeah, from a Palace perspective, just extremely frustrating how this is dragging on. Pre-season started yesterday. This must be affecting things like transfers, ins and outs, and it just feels like, a real opportunity to maybe kick on this year and, progress, and this is kind of halting us. So it all just seems very, very avoidable, is what I would say.
Do you want to make a concise point, Liam, to John, who's sitting opposite me?
I think you made a really good point already. I mean, and make another, but God, hugely frustrating.
Yeah. There is one question I'd like to ask you, John. It relates to an article which came out maybe last week in the Times. Now, I'm just going to ask you the question, and it's probably a yes or no, really. The article basically states in the Times that you sat in front of the other owners of Palace at the UEFA meeting and told them all that you played a key point in firing Glasner. Now, I suppose if you did do that, and I will let you obviously answer, but if you did do that, then that has probably killed us in terms of
decisive influence
and convincing them that you didn't. So I'd like to think you didn't, but if you did, then...
No, let me talk about it. I think that idea was, I don't know if it was a Twitter story or there's an article. There's a guy who's actually pretty credible that was behind it. Tell me his name again, because I reached out to him. I said,
his name, Martin.
Martin something. Good reporter, I think. First of all,
UEFA briefed.
Incredibly untrue. He's not UEFA briefed. It's never been said. We sat. There was not a script, but we sat in front of the UEFA panel, and we were all extremely consistent on the lack of decisive influence. I was asked a question by somebody, one of the senior guys in UEFA, because we were going through our own sustainability review at Lyon, and he said just casually in the lunchroom there, well, everybody knows you were, really sort of made this Glasner hire happen. And I said, look, that's not true at all. I mean, I tried to get him in Lyon. I said if he spoke French, he'd already be there. If I don't even know if I suggested him to Dougie, or if I can't even remember the origin of that, but Dougie got on a trek, as he always does. He goes to, he's the hardest working guy in show business, and went and met him, recruited him. We had a number of guys from Lopetegui to others that were sort of being considered. And, if I'm going to call and say, yeah, I love Oliver Glasner because Dougie had sourced it, done the work, and decided he was right for the club, that I told the people at UEFA, that a suggestion is not decisive influence. Nobody tells Steve what to do on these types of things. I mean, you know him, I know him. He's as stubborn as anybody. Successful guys often are.
What was UEFA's reaction when you said, that's not decisive influence in my book?
Well, no, actually the conversation in this one-on-one with this guy is, look, you can't read that in an article because you read in articles or somebody Googled that I had this sort of history with Glasner, that it's even applicable to this situation. So it is incredibly untrue, this idea that I sat there and owned up to it in front of UEFA, because it was the opposite of that. In the UEFA panel, I don't even recall that coming up. I don't think that was a question there. I mean, so I don't know how that story got sourced or who fed it to him.
No, but John, thanks for clearing that up. And that was good of you. And you cleared it up to a Palace fan. Dan is another Palace fan. You're through to John. What do you want to say, Dan? Good morning.
Morning, chaps. You all right?
Good, thank you. Fire away.
Thank you.
So my issue, and again, the previous caller, Liam, said a couple of things that made sense. And so my question, first of all, my issue is the fact that us Palace fans have got no idea what's going on. So we're getting dribs and drabs of stories from supposed journalists that are, as you said previously, kind of making things up, pushing a slight narrative, and we still don't know where we stand. Now, unless I'm mistaken, John, you might be able to answer this. My view is, and I've been on the show before, and I've never been a massive Steve Parish fan, and I've been quite open about that. My view is that regardless of who owns the clubs, and now Woody Johnson's got the majority shareholder, it doesn't matter. My opinion I got was that you owned, was it 43%?
Correct.
Okay, so with the 43% as a majority owner, you still have no say in what goes. Steve Parish is who says what goes. Regardless of how many shares he owns in the club, he dictates what happens within that club. Is that fair?
Couple of things. Woody's not going to be a majority. I wasn't a majority, so large minority, so largest shareholder.
Okay.
The governance, there's no golden share. Steve doesn't have a golden share. There truly are sort of the four principal partners. That 25% doesn't take the form of a vote because your shares have no vote. but you're on the board. But the matters that come in front of the board, like we never really had board meetings where we had votes on things. I mean, Steve runs the club, and so his control over the club comes by the fact that he's the CEO, that he's been there for a long time, that he's respected by the other owners. The 3-1 thing that was often talked about, there were never really these votes of 3 of them, against me as one. It's just that they've been together since 2015, and I knew I was smart enough to never push anything to a vote because they were partners for a long time. They had grown to trust each other, and I'm this, kind of outsider in so many of these discussions. I'm very involved in football. I don't think there's really room for 2 of us in one small little group, which is why I started spending time thinking about other clubs.
So if you can, how would you describe your role in your time at Palace?
Well, Steve Steve, he got really upset with me that I was so open about this. I stopped talking about Palace publicly after a podcast I did with Matt Slater, where I was stupid enough to say something in support of the other owners. I thought they were getting a bad rap because everybody said, oh, they're billionaires that don't care. And they get on these calls every Friday at 11 o'clock and they hear about the club, and Steve does a good job of inviting the owners on, not just the 4 partners, but these others. And I thought Palace fans really should know that these guys actually care about the club. I got ripped for that, right? I got ripped for that.
By whom?
By Steve. And, so I think that was probably the last time you heard me talk publicly about the club or give an interview about the club. I mean, it's so...
What did that look like, that ripping?
Guys get in arguments all the time, so you don't worry about it. Steve and I get along very well. All this talk about, problems in the boardroom. It was clear to me that he was the alpha male running the club, and he's done a good job of keeping them up, and it's kept Palace fans happy for a long time. It's really tough to do. It's not like he's got the biggest budget in the world, and relegation probably should have happened at some point over the last...
How did you feel about getting ripped for it?
Nobody really rips me for long, so I give it back as hard as they give it to me. So it was a lively conversation, but it's probably the only argument I think I ever really remember with him. And so he's the authority of the club. He runs the club. He deserves to run the club. He's kept him up. Like, he's the protector of Crystal Palace, and most of the fans sort of see him that way. Doesn't have a golden share. He controls it by the power of persuasion and maybe occasional apathy because the rest of the owners were busy. Josh is conquering the world somewhere. Dave is conquering the world somewhere. I've got my little sort of stupid retirement project. I retired into football. It was maybe the dumbest thing anybody could ever do. Working harder than I ever was in retirement. But yeah, and I hate to have lost the question of the call.
No, you're fine. I think Dan's got the answer that he was maybe seeking. John, stay with us. Almost there. We'll take a short break. We're back. It's Jim White and Simon Jordan this Thursday morning. When US businessman John Textor said yes to Simon and got in the Eurostar and came over from Paris to London this morning, I think he thought it was coming in, see us all at talkSPORT and have an enjoyable chat. But John, there is no stone being left unturned, and for that we really appreciate your participation, your involvement, and the fact that I ask a question and you give an answer. What's your honest impression? What's your honest take on profit and sustainability rules? Is the law an ass here? Is this a nonsense?
PSR rules. Gosh, I mean,
you want to see them done away with, Simon?
Well, I don't know what John's thought on it. My original thought about PSR being an owner was it will deal with hyperinflation. It will control player wages. It'll suppress some of the activities in the transfer market. It'll curtail the agents. But it isn't. It just created the ability for the cabal to stay in the same position that it was in. So for me, I watch Newcastle. Whether I like the ownership model of Newcastle is relevant. I like the opportunity. We've opened the Premier League for globalisation. We've opened it for foreign investment. We've opened it for everything. Now we're trying to close it, and that will advance every other league. And I like the idea that Crystal Palace, if it wants to, with proper governance in place to make sure that it's sustainable, and what sustainability looks like is all relative to the argument. But I like to see Newcastle being able to surpass Liverpool or Manchester City or Arsenal. And right now they've got £600 million turnovers. How do Newcastle build their turnover from 300 million to 600 million in any short order? They don't.
You know the rules better than I do. Is that a FFP issue or a PSR issue?
Well, they're the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's the profitability side of it, which is you can't lose a certain amount.
Well, they've changed
over 3
FFP
years.
to PSR, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, look at these are obviously rules that are intended to keep the small teams small. I mean, how could you possibly ask, a team like Crystal Palace to compete against a Manchester City when 75% of their revenue is their limit on wages? Is that the rule? It's 75%?
Well, it was, to go to your point, it was a level of turnover, sorry, a level of profitability, ultimately. And now they're moving it. There was an idea, I don't know if you were in favour of it, I think Steve was, about anchoring it to the lowest paid Premier League club and putting multiples in place for it. I just think that initially the idea that it saved clubs. I'm really sorry for Reading and I'm really sorry for Bury and these clubs that are further down the pyramid. But an independent regulator and PSR are going to take what is Harrods and turn it into Woolworths pretty quick.
I think if Sheffield Wednesday finds an investor that's got a lot of capital, he should be able to use that capital to sort of climb up the table.
Correct.
Because everybody has the ability to write a cogent business plan and go out and sort of sell their community and sell their club to an investor.
Seed it with capital.
Well, bring in capital. Like, why is there there's literally 4 or 5 teams that are going to be the big teams forever, and that's just always going to be the case.
But it's like teams going up from the Championship, John, which you might find if you end up buying a Championship club. You land in the Premier League, you've got disadvantages because not only are you carrying the losses from the Championship, which are less, so you've got even less chance to compete. Not before it goes up, and they carry the Championship losses, which are 20 million less a season, and they've got double disadvantage.
Such is the nature of our multi-club, because I think you got to go out and find those gems for 2 million and 5 million and 1 million and assemble a squad, because you've got these ridiculous rules that say you can't spend money, so you got to find it for cheap, and somehow you got to compete against the petro clubs. But then you get a multi-club and they're like, multi-clubs are bad. So you have all those rules to deal with. And I think there are too many rules. What I love about Brazil in particular, try anything, do anything, create anything, innovate anything. Like, I have a free hand to run the club down there. We've gone from 20 million to 200 million in revenues. We're not always paying our bills on time. We were bankrupt. We had people coming after us for the social club. It's been bumpy, but nobody's telling us what to do.
There's a rumour goes around about you that you are incredibly, I had it about me, but it's even more prevalent about you, is that you're incredibly hands-on. And in fact, you're so hands-on, you want to pick the team. And if you don't get an opportunity to do that, then coaches get their walking papers. What's the validity of that argument?
Almost. I don't pick the team, but I do have final authority. What I do is I force collaboration.
Right.
I find that some of the best football people are the most shy in the room. I favor scouts, not sporting directors, and I think the scouts are the guys with the sort of the smallest voices at times, and they're the people with the most ad. I think I learned that from Dougie. Dougie goes to I don't know how many games. I watch hundreds of games a year. I don't think I'm a football guy. When I was starting my academy, I started my academy in 2005. I was going to 250 to 300 games a year from the grass. I'd go watch 12 and 15
when
a
you
weekend.
say you have final say, are you saying on purchases? You're not saying on team selection on a match day, are you?
No, not that at all. I'm talking about player selection.
I thought you picked a team a moment ago. No,
that's why I'm clarifying.
Your final authority.
So the scouts picked a team.
Right.
I watched them get in a fight, and it was never a fight. And what I do is I force loving collaboration on these people to make them work together, and the answers often sort of become obvious. And the owner ultimately has to say, upon hearing it all from the football guys, we're picking that guy for this reason.
For a purchase, yeah.
Now, as far as running the teams, I have a very straightforward plan. You hire somebody based on their vision. Does it match yours? Do they play the kind of ball you want to play? But here's the thing. If you hire them because they tell you their philosophy and their plan, then I want to see them implement their plan. So what I ask for in advance of every game is a full game plan. I want them to anticipate the opponent. They write it up. This is what the opponent's going to do. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to respond. And I look at it. I read it. I don't talk to them about it. And I say one thing. Great. Thanks. Have fun. I say that before any game. At the end of the game, I never call them right at the end of it. I don't yell. I'm not upset. Some of my best games that I've watched as an owner have been losses because I see the teams doing what the coach wants. And then maybe a day later, what do I say? If going into it, I say have fun. Coming out of it, I say, what did you learn? And so we lost a game 2-0 to Santos in Luis Castro's first year. Our fans were pissed. I walked out of there so happy. It was away. It was the first time I saw the players sort of implementing his plan. So I see his plan. I hold him accountable to his plan. Does he stay with his plan? Now, Renato Paiva, why did we terminate him after he just beat PSG? He'd broken his own principles. He moved away from his plan. We hired him because he had sort of 5 vertical lanes of spacing. He's a positional coach. He, very good educating players on where to be on the field in different sort of moments and different thirds. And then honestly, our fans beat the crap out of him down there. A lot of pressure down there, started breaking his principles, started going defensive. We're playing on our heels. We should have beaten Atletico Madrid. We should have beaten Palmeiras. We were a better team than Palmeiras.
So you fired this guy at the Club World Cup?
When he breaks his principles, and that was 10 games developing, we saw this happening.
Just after he'd beaten PSG?
Yeah, but the decision was made over the course of 10 games. And you can...
And did you have the decisive say, get rid of him?
Of course. But I said to him, Coach, I go, what's the best game you ever played in your life? As a coach. And he said, well, PSG. I go, what do you think my best game was as an owner? And he starts to look, and I said, PSG. I go, but this is not PSG. You're playing Palmeiras today. It's time to play football. So go out there and beat the crap out of them, right? What did we do? We sat back on our heels and we watched them advance. So for 10 games, he was getting more and more defensive. He was breaking his principles. And when you break your principles, you've got to go.
You're going to get your head handed to you by the British media. They're going to categorize you absolutely, unequivocally as an overreaching owner.
Yeah, well, we win cups, don't we?
Then that's the answer, isn't it?
You want entertainment.
Listen,
what do you think of the Club World Cup?
I don't make these decisions individually. If the entire football department comes to me and says, we have to make a decision on this coach, we make it.
Yeah.
I don't just come flying in and fire people.
Sure.
That was happening over a course of 10 games. We could see the arc of the coach changing. I think this guy's an incredible coach, Paiva, but in his next job, he's got to sort of stick with his principles. He can't let the screaming fans in Brazil. I mean, they're brutal.
Did you personally sack him, or did you put the word out? That's time up.
I tried to do it directly, but I thought it would have been really rude to do before getting back on the plane, coming back on the World Cup.
But it's a fascinating insight to the thought process, because I remember years ago, not to superimpose myself in the conversation, Trevor Francis was my manager, asking him to write a blueprint of how we're going to get better, because we'd just finished 10th in the league. The previous season he'd come, when he'd come over, we were top of the league. I asked for a blueprint. He wrote a blueprint. I said, "It's crap. This is no good. It's the same thing. It's more of the same." He said, "It is more of the same." I said, "More of the same got us 10th. I don't want you here." Now, that's, for me, as a commercial man and a football thinker, is a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
But in the British press, that's like an owner's overreach. No.
Well, running a company, guys that, look, I'm not a football guy. It's just I have to judge people based on what did you bring to me? Are you sticking with your principles? Are you executing your principles? Because the entire organization is trying to form around a coach and get on the same page.
Sure.
You're recruiting players. Down at Botafogo, we say smart, technical, and fast. Fast with the ball, fast with your feet. We want this ball moving around like crazy. We want the defense to be dizzy, disoriented. We want to be able to create space, right? This is our philosophy, the Botafogo way. So we're all on board with this. And when the coach comes and he's on board with it and we hire him and there's a match, and then he starts going the other way, the entire football department comes to me and says, we have to do something.
Yeah.
So I do.
Couple of quick fire ones and then we'll finish.
Yeah.
The Club World Cup, has it been a success? You enjoying it?
Look, I don't know financially if it's a success. I think what's really cool about it is for me, it's really interesting to test the levels around the world because you don't really get that in the World Cup. You have these all-star teams, national teams that come together. They know each other. They hardly practice together. They have to come together quickly. They have to go out and play. I think that's one way to test the level of talent around the world, but it's a very weird process to sort of, they're not well practiced together. But to see a club that plays together in and out, you know, in a league, testing itself against other leagues, to see how well the Brazilian teams did against top competition around the world. Fluminense, my fans are so upset with me that they ended up getting to a semifinal. We thought we deserved to be there, but
how much did you make out of it? How much did Botafogo make out of it?
Oh, probably $30 million or something.
Right.
So, but I think, look, Super League is obviously controversial. I think if it ever comes back, it should be the world playing. I think the world wants to play football against each other. That's what the Club World Cup proves. It was really, really cool for people to see these levels in these different countries and the teams that play together, that practice together, testing their level against other leagues. Yeah. That was really cool. I think
in the short term, are we going to see Premier League games going stateside? Are we going to see Manchester United playing Liverpool in New York?
I don't know. You know, I don't have these American ideas to bring to English football. I'm not going to have an opinion on that. I mean, I don't. I want the world to play. I want Brazilian teams to play against English teams. I want you know, teams from Bulgaria to play against teams in Kazakhstan. I love it. Look, I think Todd Bowley showed up a couple of years ago and got destroyed for this idea. He sort of suggested an all-star game. I thought that'd be really cool. But no, as far as teams traveling to play in the U.S., I mean, I think the U.S. was a bit disappointing in the Club World Cup. They should have been going to more of these games. They're incredible games in the Club World Cup.
I think we can finish on this. An easy one for you to finish with, John. The 115 charges facing Manchester City, we still don't know. What's the talk at boardroom level elsewhere or amongst elite businessmen like you?
About that? I hate to disappoint you, but I haven't thought of it. I've never read the charges. I don't think of the charges. It's a little known secret. I was a City fan since before they were even owned by Abu Dhabi. My kids grew up in City gear. My FC Florida, you can go to the website, you can see it's got the Etihad font and the word FC. So I'm a bit disappointed that their success comes largely off of money because I was a fan before they had money. Ian Bishop played there. He's one of the guys that we brought to create my academy. So I like the old City more than I like the new City. I don't know what the charges are. I don't have an opinion on it.
In your view, who runs the Premier League? Is it Richard Masters or is it the Big Six?
I think, you know, this is where Steve Parrish actually does really, really well. It always irritates me. He's like the smartest guy in the room, but he is often the smartest guy in the room. And I think he fights very hard for the bottom 14. And there is a divide, the 6 and the 14. Maybe that changes with Newcastle. But I think there's pretty good balance.
And to finish with, whether it is Europa League football for Crystal Palace next season or Europa Conference League football, whichever one it is, live on talkSPORT, what do you want to say to the Palace fans listening?
Look, I'm obviously gone now. I'd like to be remembered as somebody that tried to help. Our plan was to get back to Europa League every year, every other year. It feels a little hurtful when you're one of the guys that helped and just for one tournament and 1 year without a plan to go back every year, just for 1 year, you know, the guys that helped go away, like, please get them out of here because we got to play this tournament. Like, I think the Palace fans should be asking for that kind of thing every year, not once in every 100 years. So it's a bummer, you know, to be the guy that helped. And then they, please, will you go? Will you go? We want to play in this tournament. We want to get eliminated in group stage because, you know, we don't have the right squad for it. But, you know, God, we were here. I think the memory of the FA Cup, the caller, I understand what he said, but God, never see a cloud over the FA Cup. That was one of the most incredible moments in history. You'll always have that. Whatever happens in the Europa League, you know, expect the ownership to get you back there every year. Don't just hang on to 1 year. And I think I helped to get them there, along with the entire ownership group and the staff. I'd like to be remembered as a guy who helped and got out of the way when I started to hurt the club, and I hope that's enough, and I hope to go to Europa League.
John Textor, what can we say? I want to thank you very much indeed for your time and for the very fact that you sat there and answered everything we threw at you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it, Simon. Invite me back anytime. Give me more advance notice. Maybe I can sleep, have a little more energy to match yours next time. But
brilliant. You had 4 hours sleep, didn't you?
Yeah.
John Textor with us live in talkSPORT.
Great.
Plays that villain role very well now. That's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. Get ready for the golden era of sports betting. Visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. 18+gambleaware.org.
And at this stage, we're joined by Sean Martin from BetMGM to look at some of the top sporting events and the odds round and about them. We'll get to John Textor with Simon again very shortly. But let's have a look at Wimbledon. Sean, what are you thinking? Good morning.
Yeah, morning fellas, long time no speak. Yeah, down to the last four in both the men's and the women's singles. The women's event gets started today, and I suppose the main question is this Sabalenka's time? She's lost in the final of both slams so far this year, but she's world number one. She's dropped just one set so far. She's odds-on favourite to beat Amanda Anisimova today, and 4-5 favourite to win the whole thing as well. In the other women's semi, Iga Swiatek, who's only dropped one set so far as well, is 3-10 favourite to beat Belinda Bencic. Well, in the men's tomorrow, we've got Carlos Alcaraz in his 8th Grand Slam semi-final at just 22. He's faster to that mark than both Federer and Djokovic. He's ultra short at 6-1 on to beat Taylor Fritz. The American, to be fair, he's got a scary for him, 1-1 and 16 losses record against Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic as a trio, so almost 4-1 for that upset. Might not tempt too many. In the second semi, it's a repeat of last month's French Open semi between Simon's pick, Yannick Sinner, and Novak Djokovic. Sinner won that 3-0, and the last time he actually lost to Djokovic was November 2023, but Djokovic has beaten him both times they've met on grass, both of which were actually at Wimbledon. Nonetheless, Sinner 11-25 favourite, and backing all four semi-final favourites, guys, pays just over 2-1, but it can't possibly be that straightforward with Djokovic involved, can it?
Well, this is true. On the women's singles, Simon, Iga, the Polish girl, Swiatek, I saw her win at Roland Garros. I think she's awesome, but I'm not sure if she's got it to come out outright winner. I'm not sure.
She certainly does. It's about the opposition she's playing against. But going back to the Sinner Djokovic question, I do think it's straightforward. As much as you should never write off Novak Djokovic, you should never take him lightly. Sinner is imperious. There was a reaction to perhaps the luck he got in the match against who defaulted? Gregor Dimitrov. Yeah. And he's now regained his poise. He's bashed up the quarter-finalist. I think he'll beat Djokovic in 4.
Wow. Okay. Who's going to come out on top in the world of boxing? What's your thinking this morning, Sean?
Well, where to start with this one, because New York is the centre of the boxing universe, really, this weekend. I'm looking forward to hearing yourselves and Spencer over the next hour or so. Intrigued in particular by Hamza Shiraz up at super middle after that split draw with Carlos Adames in February. We've got him 7-10 favourite to go and beat Edgar Berlanga in Queens on Saturday, 13-5 by stoppage, and Shakur Stevenson heavy favourite at 10-1 on to beat William Zepeda later on the same card. But for me, it's got to be Taylor Serrano 3 this weekend, really, Simon. Madison Square Garden, Friday night, well, early hours of Saturday morning our time. Trilogy fight, Taylor 2-0 up. Both previous fights gone the distance, and genuinely, as a combined spectacle, up there with any pair of fights I've seen, male or female. Now, I had a wee look back at the odds I gave you on here before the second fight, guys, and back then we had Taylor under even money to win and Serrano bang on evens. This time round, Taylor's actually moved all the way out to 8-5, and it's Serrano who's odds on to win at 8-15. Is that justified, do you reckon, Simon? And do you think her...
I do. I think it probably is. Again, you don't find yourself wanting to back against Katie Taylor because of her contribution to the sport. But we are seeing Katie Taylor on the other side of her best performances. And the fascinating thing would be is if you got Serrano winning this fight, could you see a fourth to even up the circumstances? But it's a great... Oh, listen, Hamza Shiraz versus Edgar Berlanga is a great fight.
Yeah.
And it's a must-win fight for Hamza after that kind of... doubtful performance against Carlos Adames for the middleweights, going up to super middleweight. Will he translate there? Is he world class? I think he is. I think it's a great fight.
Yeah.
And I think Shakur Stevenson against William Zepeda, I think Shakur Stevenson's class will come through.
And briefly, Scottish Open Golf Day today. What's your thought then, Sean?
Yeah, all systems going. North Berwick tournament favourite Scottish effort eagled his first hole and is now 4 under through 12, so he's come in already from 92 yesterday to just over 2.5-1 the last time I checked. But at the top of the leaderboard at the moment is Austrian Sepp Straka and Colombian Nico Echeverria. They're 14 and 50-1 to get the job done respectively. Behind them, there's a clutch of players in a share of second, the likes of Ludwig Oberg, Padraig Harrington, Wyndham Clark, but also, Jim, Scotsman Callum Hill. He's 100-1 to pull off a remarkable home win, and it really would be a home win with him, I think, being from Kirkcaldy, just across the Firth of Forth from the Renaissance Club. And before we go, you know me, guys, must mention Robert McIntyre, defending Scottish Open champ. Not the best of starts, but he has got himself back to 2 under par, meaning he's moved out slightly from 20-1 yesterday to 28-1 at the moment to become the first player to win this competition in back-to-back years. Plenty of big names still waiting to tee off later today. Rory McIlroy, Victor Hovland, and Danny Murphy's pick, Matt Fitzpatrick as well. So let's see how they do, because there's a long way to go.
Good job, Sean Martin, is what I'm trying to say. Remember, you can visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. Keep things golden with responsible play at betmgm.co.uk. 18 plus, gambleaware.org.
Four headlines, all involving the number 4. We start with the Lionesses' 4-0 win as they ran riot against the Netherlands to restore order to their Euros title defence. A brace from Lauren James and goals from Georgia Stanway and Ella Toone means a win against Wales will be enough to send them through to the quarters. But after such a poor showing against France, what changed?
I think today our decision-making on the ball was good. We created a lot of chances, and also the way the Netherlands played, we could exploit spaces they left behind because they, of course, they also want to press high, but they couldn't get their press on us, also because of our decision making, I think.
PSG demolished Real Madrid 4-0 to reach the Club World Cup final. Dean Ashton says the Parisians are on a different plane to everyone else at the minute.
They let them off in the second half, really, but even then they could have had 2 or 3. It just shows when you get that team ethic and combine it with, world-class talent, then you can do very, very well.
They'll take on Chelsea in the Club World Cup final, which will be live on talkSPORT Sunday evening. The 4-year wait for Jofra Archer to be back in England's Test Whites ends today. He returns to the home of cricket up against Jasprit Bumrah with the series on an absolute knife edge. And his Sussex coach Paul Farbrace told talkSPORT now is the right time to bring him back after all of those injuries.
There are risks to anybody taking the field, but there's risk to crossing the road. So, if you stop doing it, you wouldn't take a risk at all. So the bloke's raring to go. He's a game changer, and you can hear from Ben Stokes that he's absolutely excited to have him back in.
Buzzing.
And we're into the final 4 of Wimbledon now. Novak Djokovic will meet world number 1 Jannik Sinner after getting through his quarter-final match last night, but there is concerns over how fit he'll be after suffering a nasty fall on centre court.
the real impact or effect of what happened, I will feel tomorrow. So let's see. I'm hoping the next 24 to 48 hours that the severity of what was happening on the court and what happened is not too bad. That I'll be able to play it at my best and free of pain in 2 days.
For all the latest news, head to the website at talksport.com.
Thursday lunchtime, Jim White and Simon Jordan. We are live on talkSPORT, as always, streaming live, of course, on YouTube and your smart TV. You can watch this show as well as listen to it. John Textor has come and gone. We'll pour over some of what he said in the hour and a half he gave us live on air. In the meantime, it's time for this.
Business briefing on talkSPORT with Tesco Mobile for Business. Are you a contractor? Get business phone bills for up to 40% less than the big mobile networks. For terms and verification, visit tescomobile.com/business.
Yes, we're going to be talking boxing shortly with Spencer Oliver. In the meantime, we are locked into one of the top business stories with Tesco Mobile for Business. And for that very reason, Stefan Borson, FFP expert, that and a whole lot more, has stopped by and joins us live on the show. John Textor. Not often you get someone who is at the heart of a story like that and then comes in, Stefan, and not only speaks, but speaks live and speaks openly and honestly for about 90 minutes, thanks to Simon's invitation. What was your take on it? What's your takeaway?
So I thought it was obviously fascinating to have him here with the direct knowledge and being open, and I think you have to say he was open. He was here for 90 minutes. You don't put yourself in that spotlight with the two of you if you're not somebody open and honest. So yeah, I think he gave the answers to the best of his ability. I think he's exposed himself slightly to a sort of cross-examination in an environment like this, which I wouldn't do for 90 minutes because, in his situation, there's quite a lot of sensitivity around the stuff that he's involved in. But he did that, so that's good. Look, I don't agree with everything he said. I mean, there's certain things, certain answers that he gave, particularly to the technical questions that Simon was asking early on, which I don't think are quite right. I mean, the idea that you've sold 100 million euros of footballers.
Forever,
yeah, I mean, it doesn't work that way. We all know that you can have a year where you can have 3 years where you sell 100 million euros of footballers, and in the fourth year, you've got nothing left to sell. So I don't think that's quite right. It's quite interesting, the level of knowledge that he almost doesn't have about where the UEFA process is with Crystal Palace. It sounds like he's also waiting for one of the journalists to receive the press release from UEFA sometime this afternoon.
Well, he did bristle now and again when I introduced, with my words, the very reason that he's here. And he was here this morning because Crystal Palace are likely to be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France that saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon, John's club, he owns them, will be in the Europa League, but FA Cup winners Crystal Palace will not, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. So I put it to John, if it stays that way, and it's the Europa League for Lyon, and it's the Europa Conference League for Crystal Palace, would he be feeling a degree of personal responsibility?
Look, I'll admit to not even thinking about the issue. Of course, I have to. But I also read the rule. So please read the rule yourself. Like, everybody's talking about it like it's so obvious. The rule's very clear. If you have decisive influence, you may need to consider this. I don't. I didn't. If I had decisive influence, I wouldn't have been trying to sell the club starting in June of 2024. And if UEFA wants to look what they're doing, if you have a multi-club problem, they say, well, sell off your interest or get out of governance. Well, I did. I hired an investment bank. I was already out.
So if that evidence is so clear, why are UEFA dragging their feet on this?
One, I don't think they're dragging their feet. Two, I think they have safe harbor in this issue of decisive influence. But given the situation that Lyon was in, a possible relegation, Why would they start this whole debate of people applying for appeal and stuff if they didn't have to? The draw isn't until, I don't know, when, August? They have time.
Yeah.
Now, it feels like they're dragging their feet because we as fans, we want to know. We want our team in.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think they were shocked as anybody. UEFA approved Lyon through a rigorous financial sustainability review. Why would they think the DNCG would suddenly have a problem with that same issue?
Well, the upshot is Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 was rescinded. Stefan is with Simon. Stefan, where does it leave Crystal Palace and the multi-club ownership situation?
Well, if only we could ask somebody that's close to the situation. I mean, if John Textor doesn't know, then the chance of us knowing is low. But clearly there is an issue, and clearly they don't fully accept everything that Textor said. If there was no issue whatsoever in respect of decisive influence, regardless of what we might think based on what he says or a look of the sort of overview, they obviously do think there's an issue, otherwise it wouldn't have got this far. So we'll have to see where they conclude, but clearly they do think there's an issue. What we do know from the Red Bull case historically is that the burden of proof is on UEFA to prove decisive influence. It's not for Textor to prove that he doesn't have decisive influence, it's for UEFA to prove that he does. So that's obviously a higher bar for UEFA, and also it's got to be to the comfortable satisfaction standard, which is, again, a higher bar than just a balance of probabilities. So UEFA will need to be quite sure about their position to make the decision that he does have decisive influence and therefore that Crystal Palace can't play in the Europa. Now, it was interesting that he raised, well, how does that work with Brøndby in terms of the conference? You would have thought from the outside that they'd been all over this situation and he'd have all the answers in terms of this situation, but clearly they don't, and they're also waiting for the decision to be made. You would have to assume from the briefings that we've seen in the media that if they fall out of the Europa, they go into the conference. But it's not completely clear how that works either.
Is that your reading of it, Simon? Now that he's gone.
My reading of it was always that the UEFA didn't want to make it. If the Lyon situation resolved itself, UEFA didn't have to make a decision. Now it's resolved itself insofar as they've stayed in Europa League. Now I don't know whether UEFA will make a decision and be disadvantageous to Palace, and Palace will appeal it against CAS, and CAS have a different burden of obligation upon them, and maybe CAS overturn it. I've always felt, and maybe it's because my nose tells me rather than my head, that Palace will find their way through this. And there was contradictions because on one hand John was saying that there's clearly documented evidence determining decisive control, yet in another part of the conversation John's talking about the fact that ultimately it's accepted and understood and never challenged by the other three owners that ultimately Parish made all the decisions. So kind of which one was it, John? But the fact of the matter is that if they've got documentation, as John alludes to, that proves the fact that decisive influence, i.e. majority-minority shareholdings, don't determine commercial outcomes, then I think it's really incumbent upon UEFA to look at the ridiculousness of the muddled thinking that they've got around decisive control and work their way through it in a fashion that doesn't penalise Crystal Palace.
It's just if it was as simple as he expressed, we wouldn't be in the situation, clearly, right, in the middle of July where we're still waiting for them to make a decision.
Second guess it for me, Stefan. What's likely to happen?
I think UEFA will say that there is a decisive influence from John Textor, and if John Textor has not sold the stake before that decision is made, then I think they will say that they will go down into the conference, and then Crystal Palace will obviously appeal to CAS. But I do think it will be challenging to challenge this decision of UEFA, because I just don't think UEFA would have made that decision lightly. They know that Crystal Palace are going to challenge it, obviously, and they'll also know that all the stuff I've just said about the burden being on them, they must have, in their view, if they do decide this, they must have strong evidence that he has some kind of decisive influence.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of what he says.
Yes.
You know, the facts and the evidence will be set. And what we did see from him sitting here is he does like to talk. And although he denied the story about Glasner, it is not impossible that when they were in with UEFA, Parish was saying one thing, and then they asked Textor a similar question, and he went off in a long answer and really said something contradictory.
In fairness to the argument that John was raising, we've also seen real-life playouts of the difference of opinion between Textor and Parish over the loan situation, where Textor wanted the loan situation between multi-clubs, and the Premier League wanted to vote it down, and Parish voted against it. And I don't think Textor particularly liked it. So you saw an actual enactment of the balance of power.
Sure.
Parish voted for something that apparently for decisive influence in the football club didn't want.
What we do know, Stefan, is that elsewhere, both Chelsea and Aston Villa were fined by UEFA for breaching their financial rules. Chelsea fined €31 million, Villa fined €11 million. On the Chelsea one, will they be shrugging their shoulders at being caught by UEFA?
I think so, yes. I mean, so if you go back all the way to the start of when we learnt about these little tricks that Chelsea were planning, we always knew that they weren't going to work for UEFA and that they would breach UEFA, and they've not been bothered about that, and they've taken a view that it's a cost of doing business. And we've talked about this many times over the years. Now, what we didn't know was they failed two legs of the UEFA rules. One, football earnings, which is very much like PSR, but with all of those clever transactions that Chelsea carried out disallowed.
Right.
So you can't do the hotel sale, you can't do the women's sale, they don't count for UEFA purposes, but it's effectively a PSR test, but with a lower cap. Okay? So it's a cap of €60 million, and they failed it. No surprise. They've also failed it for the season just gone. So not only did they fail for the year to 30th of June 2024, both Aston Villa and Chelsea, but they also failed for the year that's just finished that hasn't yet been audited. And so that's why Chelsea are in this 4-year settlement period versus Villa, who are in the 3-year settlement period. Now, Chelsea have been smart again, because to do a 4-year settlement period, all they've done is said, we are definitely going to fail for the year just gone. These are our projections of how we're going to fail. And they've effectively set their own target with UEFA and got permission to do it by paying an extra €15 million on top of what Villa are paying. So Villa are paying 5 up front for the breach of the football earnings rule.
Right.
Chelsea are paying 20, so they're paying an extra 15, but Chelsea have bought themselves an extra year of settlement period. And by buying yourselves an extra year of settlement period, they push the issue, the real crunch issue, they push it right out to 2029. Okay, so they're not going to be worried about being banned from any European competition in all likelihood until 2029. And that's a smart thing to do. And all they've had to do to get to that point is pay an extra 15 million. Now, all of this stuff where we hear about, oh, it's conditional, there's up to £80 million. There's 20 million a season. There's almost zero chance they're going to breach their own projection. So you can forget about paying an extra 20 for the first season that they're involved in. The second season, they're allowed to make a loss of €60 million. They're also allowed to have allowances of another €60 million. So they're allowed to lose €120 million after player transfers. They're not gonna breach it. They've been given a situation where they've both themselves and Villa have effectively bought themselves a long time. But Chelsea, by paying an extra €15 million, have bought themselves an extra year on top.
Wow. Stefan, thank you very much indeed. Stefan Borson dropping by and joined us for one part of the show today. Stefan, thank you for that. On the day that we had John Textor live in this studio. Live next, we'll talk boxing with Spencer Oliver.
Business briefing on talkSPORT with Tesco Mobile for Business. Are you a contractor? Get business phone bills for up to 40% less than the big mobile networks. For terms and verification, visit tescomobile.com/business.
plays that villain role very well now. It's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
Thursday lunchtime, we'll talk boxing with Spencer Oliver in just a few moments. We're heading to Lords in a few moments as well. But just in the passing, for the many of you getting in touch, you can hear the whole of the interview, 90 minutes, more of it. The whole of the John Textor interview. You can hear that on the Outspoken podcast later this afternoon. Trying to get that rushed along for you so that all of it is in there for you. You will not miss a thing when John Textor stopped by and joined Simon and myself here in studio. Let's get to Lords. Let's get to England-India, the third test. Let's get to Sam Ellard.
Yeah, Jim, England winning the toss, batting first. They got to drinks of 39 without loss and would have been very happy with the hour's work. But then the first over after drinks, 2 wickets in the over for India. Nitish Kumar ready. First it was Duckett for 23, a shorter ball that Duckett looked to pull into the leg side. It took his glove. Good catch to the right-hand side by Rishabh Pant. Ollie Pope came to the crease. First ball, driving at a 4 ball. Took the outside edge. Shubman Gill, tough chance to gully. Dropped, but it brought Zach Crawley onto strike, and Nitish Kumar ready, getting a ball to angle into Crawley and then moving away. It took the outside edge to Rishabh Pant. So Crawley goes for 18, Duckett goes for 23. Ollie Pope has 1 run to his name. Joe Root not out on 5. So India bang on the money after drinks, Jim, and England 49 for 2.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Spencer Oliver, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
How are you?
Very well.
Good to have you on board. Spencer, let's get right into it. We know that Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn will go again. Whether this man is having that or not is another matter. But we also know this. The British Boxing Board of Control has fined Chris Eubank Jr. £10,000. Now, for those who remember the controversy around the build-up to the fight, Eubank Jr. Used a sauna, it was thought, by way of cutting weight to make weight for the fight. He's been fined £10,000 by the British Board of Control, but it's not for using a sauna, it's for misuse of social media. Yeah. He told everybody that wanted to listen on social media that this is how he's done it. Does that show, Spencer, that the rules are there to be broken as long as you don't post about it on your socials?
Absolutely. You know, if the British Boxing Board of Control, you know, I think in their rules they say you're not allowed to use saunas. In this instance, Chris Eubank Jr. was using a sauna suit. He was actually on a bike for an hour before that. There's no rules saying you can't use sauna suits. And now he's posted it on social media and he's being penalised for that. I mean, it's absolutely crazy that basically what they're saying is they're putting the rules out there themselves, aren't they? Do whatever you want behind closed doors, but don't post about it. And if you do, we're going to penalise you for it. We've got to remember, Jim, that, you know, the Boxing Board of Control here, now, they capped the rehydration clause in this fight to £170, so they're weighing at £160. The following day, they're only allowed to weigh 170. Now, all the governing bodies, you know, their rehydration clauses are actually £12. So they've gone below that. And if they're worried about the health and safety of fighters, why are they allowed to be capped at £10 going into that one with Chris Eubank Jr. knowing that he's tight at the weight?
I mean, where do you stand? Spencer's just elaborated on it and articulated it well. Fine 10 grand for use of social media.
I don't think that that's right, because I don't think it is a rule. I think it's guidance. And I think Robert Smith clarified it. It's not a rule, it's guidance. And so under the auspice of guidance, they're not entirely able to do what they want with him. They can stop the fight, but I'm not sure they can sanction him. But the fact that their guidance is being counteracted or ignored by Chris Eubank for his own motivations, we might suggest that his motivations were to prepare himself for showing the world what condition he is in if he lost. That might be a cynical way of looking at it.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that they're using the social media smack to say, all right, we give you guidance, you've ignored it, but now you're going to post it on social media taking the mickey. So I think the fact that it's not a hard and fast rule is the reasons why he hasn't been sanctioned under a rule, because as Robert Smith, I think, said, it's not a rule, it's guidance.
I mean, look,
if it's not a hard and fast rule, then what's wrong with him posting pictures of it in social media?
Absolutely. Listen, all fighters use sauna suits, and the British Boxing Board know about that, and it's the way they go about it. In this instance, he's got off a bike in a sauna suit to show how much he's struggling to make the weight, and the reason he's done that is because the fight was made at 160, the rehydration clause was capped the following morning at 170, which is below anything any governing body does, because it's normally £12. And the Boxing Board of Control, if they're worried about health and safety, why have they capped it at 170?
But the only reason it's capped at 170 for rehydration is because he was being paid £1 million bonus.
Yeah.
So if it had failed, if it had gone, I tell you what, I'm going to breach that 170. I'm going to go up to the hydration level I want. Conor Benn would have still been in the ring with him, and it'd be £1 million poorer. So it's got nothing to do with the British Boxing Board.
No, but I understand that, Simon. But what I'm saying is, if they're worried about the health and safety of fighters, hence why they don't want them to use saunas and sauna suits and post about it, even though it's not in the rules and regulations that you can't do that. If they're that worried about it, why would they cap it at 170, knowing that any other governing body, the rehydration clause, is at one? But if they're worried about the safety of it,
again, you're missing the point. They didn't cap it at 170. They sanctioned it and allowed it to go through under the auspice of the fact that if Chris Eubank wanted to breach it, the main consequences of breaching it were not a fight being stopped, was Chris Eubank didn't get his £1 million.
Right.
So the condition precedent was they're not capping it at 170. Eubank is being paid £1 million, from what I understand, to be below 170.
So the Boxing Board of Control have obviously found out about that and want every part of that. Hence, with a £375,000 fine that he got for just narrowly missing the weight.
You see, that
£100,000 for the slap.
Exactly.
And now £10,000 here. You go, come on. Well, I mean, what's going on here?
I mean, when he missed the weight in fight week, he was fined $375,000. He was handed $100,000 fine for slapping Ben with the head. You think he's bothered about all this?
Of course he's bothered at it, because at some point it's got to stop. You can't keep giving it to the British Boxing Board of Control. Let's take a look at this whole situation and what it is. You know, when we're talking about what is actually going on here, you've got a guy that's being victimised in my eyes because he keeps getting penalised for every little single thing.
Yeah.
And you've got certain people that can get away with, you know, if you get good lawyers and you can get away with certain situations and not be penalised for it and get the money that he's getting fined for. It just doesn't make any sense.
Eubank Jr. victimised?
No. Eubank Jr. signed a contract to be at a certain weight. He failed it. The conditions, the fines would have been set on a token scale. And the other thing he's referring to, well, that's poor drafting of regulations from the British Boxing Board of Control that enabled people to skate out from underneath of failed drugs tests.
Yeah. Spencer, you can hit me in the face with an egg anytime you like. I'm going to charge you nothing for it.
Absolutely.
A lot to get through in the final half hour. 12:30 this Thursday lunchtime.
headlines, all involving the number 4. We start with the Lionesses' 4-0 win as they ran riot against the Netherlands to restore order to their Euros title defence. A brace from Lauren James and goals from Georgia Stanway and Ella Toone means a win against Wales will be enough to send them through to the quarters. But after such a poor showing against France, what changed?
I think today our decision making on the ball was good. We created a lot of chances, and also the way the Netherlands played, we could exploit spaces they left behind.
PSG demolished Real Madrid 4-0 to reach the Club World Cup final. Dean Ashton says the Parisians are on a different plane to everyone else at the minute.
They let them off in the second half, really, but even then they could have had 2 or 3. It just shows when you get that team ethic and combine it with, world-class talent, then you can do very, very well.
The 4-year wait for Jofra Archer to be back in England's Test Whites ends today. And his Sussex coach Paul Farbrace told talkSPORT now is the right time to bring him back after all of those injuries.
There are risks to anybody taking the field, but there's risk to crossing the road. So, if you stop doing it, you wouldn't take a risk at all. So the bloke's raring to go. He's a game changer.
And we're into the final 4 of Wimbledon now. Novak Djokovic will meet world number 1 Jannik Sinner after getting through his quarter-final match last night. But there is concerns over how fit he'll be after suffering a nasty fall on centre court.
We are now just 1 week out from the undisputed heavyweight championship fight between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois. You do not want to miss this as we expect another explosive battle. It's live on talkSPORT on Saturday, July the 19th, or you can watch it exclusively on DAZN. Head to DAZN.com for more information. Fast approaching. I tell you who's fast approaching at this lunchtime. 3 becomes 4 because Spencer is in studio alongside Simon and myself. But with Usyk against Dubois in mind, delighted that former cruiserweight world champion Tony Bellew joins us live. Tony, good afternoon to you, mate.
Good afternoon, guys. How's it going?
Very good, thank you. You're looking, if anyone's watching on YouTube and your smart TV, Tony's just sitting back this lunchtime, just lazing around, aren't you, Tony? You don't need to do much these days, mate. You've done the hard yards, have you not?
I wish I was just lazing around, mate. I've got too many kids and too much going on to laze around, so absolutely not. No, chasing them.
Listen, where are you at then, as it's days away, Dubois Usyk? Because part of the chat here, Tony, is that all of the Usyk camp, sure, always with their man, but maybe there was a feeling that this might be one fight too many for Alexander. And I ask you that, I suggest that to you in the knowledge that his longtime manager Alex Krashew is no longer going to be with him for this one.
I've heard that one before, Jim, if I'm being totally honest, when it comes to Alexander Usyk being past his best, or has he bitten off more than he can chew? This guy's faced every style, this guy's faced every size you can possibly imagine. There's not a style or a size he hasn't faced, really, within his division and out of his division. So I don't see Daniel Dubois posing him any new problems. What I do see is this is the best version of Daniel Dubois that he's faced. So Daniel Dubois is in the form of his career. He's coming after the best victories of his career. The tide he's on at the moment is very high. The victories over Jarrell Miller, over Filip Hrgovic and over Anthony Joshua, the resounding victories are massive and huge, things that he can achieve. But it's a completely different face he's facing in Alexander Usyk. This is someone who's conquered him before. And this is not somebody who can be bullied. This is not somebody who can be intimidated. This is not somebody who can be dictated to. And I think that's where Daniel will struggle.
Tony, where does Alexander Usyk get the motivation going over old ground against Daniel Dubois? You said there, he is better than the last time they boxed out in Poland, 2023. Dubois since gone on, got bigger, better, stronger. Where does that motivation come from? Because he's risking his legacy, isn't he?
Oh, we just lost Tony's line. We'll get back to Tony in just a second. What do you think, Simon? I mean, there is a thought process here that this might be one fight too many for Usyk.
Well, I mean, he's a consummate professional. He's lived his life right. So whether it's one type fight too many, we'll not know because we don't know the impacts. We saw a surprising impact upon Deontay Wilder, and now we look back on the 3 fights that he had with Tyson Fury, and we say it's unexplainable. But no one saw Deontay Wilder falling apart the way that he has. I don't see Usyk in that space. The question for me and Spencer that we've debated repeatedly over the last 2 or 3 shows on Talk Boxing is, in order for Daniel to win this fight, it needs to be Daniel in his very best form and maybe Usyk 3 or 4% off, and that gives him an opportunity. The thing with Usyk is that he's such a specimen of a fighter and such an athlete, and lives his life in such a way. And if any of that's not changed, the only thing that can perhaps come into the mix is, does he get old overnight after the last Fury fight?
Absolutely. Spencer, now that Tony's back, you want to make your point to him?
Yeah, Tony, I was saying, where does Alexander Usyk, get the motivation from? He's going over old ground, and we do know that Daniel Dubois, since 2023 out in Poland, has got bigger, better, stronger, grown in confidence. So now it all goes in his favour. I know Usyk is, the pound-for-pound generational great right now, for sure. But where does he get that motivation from?
It's quite clear, Spence, that the motivation doesn't come from money. So anyone thinking that Alexander Usyk is driven by money is wrong, because this guy has been financially secure since post my fight, to be being totally honest. He's earned an absolute fortune. He fights AJ, he fights Derek Chisora, he beats us all and beats us all up on pride. He fights for his country. What his country's gone through is horrific, and no one would possibly understand what he's fighting through, but he is. He fights for so much more than money. He fights for legacy. And that's the biggest thing that drives Alexander Usyk, his legacy. And I just think when he gets in the ring with Daniel Dubois, he doesn't have to be there. So everyone hoping and praying that he's going to get old overnight. The fight is the first to know, because things just aren't going right in camp. And he would happily pull the plug without a shadow of a doubt. And I've heard the whispers about Alex Krasiak and stuff like that. Boxers go through managers. That's just the way it goes, Spence, as you know. There's some fighters that go through trainers like they do with actual trainers on the feet. That's just the way things do sometimes. For me, I think, Daniel Dubois has a puncher's chance in this fight. There's no denying that. I think for 4 rounds, Daniel Dubois is live and dangerous. After 4 rounds pass, that's when Daniel Dubois starts getting asked questions. And as we've seen in the past, them questions, don't usually get answered. But they have to take that confidence from him first. Daniel Dubois is a confidence fighter. He's a flat track bully. He's a front foot fighter. When it's going his way, he's one of the most dangerous heavyweights in the world. But as I've said before, once them first 4 or 5 rounds pass and he's taking shots back and he's being asked questions, we've seen what can happen. So it's an intriguing fight, but it's one that I see Alexander Usyk winning and winning well.
And you said about legacy there, Tony, and that's pretty much what is on the line for Alexander Usyk now, because he's not money-driven, so it's not about that. And you're talking about legacy, risk versus reward here, and he's going over old ground against a kid that is getting better. Is that worth it? That's where I'm at.
Yeah. It obviously is. Financially, it stacks up. For his legacy, it stacks up. It's just, I think this fight's only happening. I don't think he personally likes Daniel Dubois. Well, I know he doesn't like Daniel Dubois. I think he feels very disrespected the way he jumps in the ring after the Fury 2 fight, and I want my chance, I want this, I want that. And Daniel Dubois flying high at the moment. The win over AJ is put him on a whole new stratosphere, and it's given him so much confidence. I'm so determined. Daniel Dubois is so determined that he won't even think about the last Usyk fight. It won't even be in his memory. As far as Daniel Dubois is concerned, all as Daniel Dubois will be so tunnel visioned, in my opinion, that he will just think, I've knocked out AJ at Wembley, I'm coming back to Wembley to knock out Alexander Usyk. He won't even have thoughts of the first fight. Alexander Usyk is going to have to beat them into him again, and he's going to have to take his confidence and take his will. Can he do it? Yes, I think he can. Will it be as easy as last time? Maybe not. I think this might be the first time Alexander Usyk's ever had to climb off the floor. off a headshot. I think he may have to climb off the floor, and I think he rides out a storm. But I think he gets the job done, and I think he stops him probably between round 8 and 12. But I do see Daniel Dubois at the most confident he's ever been. I do think he's a seriously dangerous fighter, but I think that confidence will be taken after round 6, and then he will be a target from rounds 6 to 9. And then if he lasts out to 12, fair play to him, but I don't think he will. It'll be too much.
Tony, as always, thank you very much indeed. Former Cruiserweight World Champion Tony Bellew with us live this lunch. I'm saying that Usyk will just have too much for Daniel Dubois come the 19th of this month. More from Spencer, myself and Simon after this.
Plays that villain role very well now. That's crying out for a little bit more attention. It comes with a lot of crazy people. I took it personally and it kind of made me rebel a bit more. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm never going to change.
Boxing update on talkSPORT with DAZN, the global home of boxing. Buy now at dazn.com/boxing.
Now then, Edgar Berlanga and Hamza Shiraz headline a stack card from New York with Shakur Stevenson defending his WBC lightweight title against William Zepeda this Sunday, live only on DAZN. Buy now at DAZN.com/boxing. Back to boxing in a second with Spencer and Simon. In the meantime, let's head down the road to Lord's, a scorcher here in London. Let's get the latest. England-India, here's Sam.
Yeah, Jim, it's a hot one today at Lords. England winning the toss and Blue Skies opting to bat first. The drinks, they were 39 with that loss and would have been really happy with where they were at. But just after the drinks break, it was Nitish Kumar Reddy who turned the morning session on his head, really, picking up 2 wickets in the space of the same over. First, he got Duckett looking to pull, took the glove, caught behind for 23. Then an absolute beauty to Zach Crawley, a ball that came back in, then moved away, took the outside edge. So Ollie Pope is in at 3 and has got 7 runs to his name. Joe Root's hit a couple of boundaries, he's not out on 18, but at the moment it's just the India bowlers who are on top. Mohammad Siraj beat the outside edge of Joe's bat a short while ago with a really good ball that just moved away, and Mohammad Siraj also found the outside edge of Ollie Pope's bat, but it fell just short of second slip KL Rahul. So it's a cracking game here, a cracking morning session, Jim, so far. Good contest between bat and ball, and we are 30 minutes away from lunch. England are 72 for 2.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. In the world of boxing, the UK's Hamza Shiraz is back in action this weekend as he takes on unified super middleweight title challenger Edgar Berlanga in New York. Where do we stand on this? We'll get the view of Spencer and Simon in a second. This was the very popular Hamza Shiraz speaking in the build-up to this to Ring Magazine.
More experience, so I can say I've been in there, and it's not kind of the question you'd ask yourself before that, can I go for it? Can I do the 12 rounds? Am I on this level? And listen, I've been there, so now I'm a lot more calm. I'm a lot more happier, to be fair.
You're happier?
Yep, a lot more happier. Whether that's moving up or whether that's the change I've made in the team, I think it's a mix of everything, to be fair.
I mean, it's fair to say we're not entirely sure about the outcome of this for a variety of reasons, Spencer. But Shiraz struggled to assert himself after a draw against WBC middleweight champion Carlos Adames in Saudi Arabia back in February. And a lot of people said he was too cautious. He was too cautious. What will he show this time? You heard him there, but what's he about to produce?
Look, there's a number of reasons why he could have been cautious. One, that he was making that middleweight limit. He's 6'3", and it was always a struggle for him to make that. And I think that showed in his performance. He damaged his hand, broke his hand, I believe, in the 5th round of the fight as well. And it was a below par performance for sure. Moving up to super middleweight is a good move for him. I think we're going to see the best of him at super middleweight. And as for Edgar Berlanga, the only real fight that he's been in was when he lost to Canelo Alvarez. That was back in September. He was convincingly beating that, dropped in the 3rd round as well. He's susceptible to a left hook, which Hamza Shiraz likes to throw. I think this is a good fight for Hamza Shiraz, and I think that making super middleweight, teaming up with Andy Lee as well, is a great move. He's a great tactician, and I think they're going there with a game plan. And Berlanga, who's very heavy-handed, you look at his record, most of his victories coming by the way of knockout. I think his first 16 were inside 1 round, and he was trying to break that record. But you look at the names that he's knocked out, and they're of no real meaning, no real substance. So I think this is a great fight for Shiraz, and I think he wins inside the distance.
I mean, I think the question is, can Hamza Shiraz take any degree of confidence from that one, or from the fight against Adames?
Well, I think Andy Lee's job to install that in him, and he will do. And Andy Lee likes to see fighters being aggressive, so I think you'll see Hamza throwing some shots in this fight. I mean, people were talking about breaking his hand in the 5th round, but up until the 5th round, he didn't throw a lot then either. So he wasn't a great performance. And we also got to give a bit more credit to Carlos Adames because he was better than people anticipated he would be. I think this is the right weight class for Hamza Shiraz. I think he's a world-class operator, and I think he'll deal with Edgar Berlanga, and I think he'll knock him out, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, look, going into this one, it's a case of both guys have to prove something. Both guys have to deliver because of their last performances. When you get that, stylistically, they're going to meet because Berlanga likes to go forward. So does Shiraz. He's a great fighter on the inside. As even though he's tall, he reminds me in many ways of Tommy Hearns type, where he throws good uppercuts, good hooks, and Berlanga will be there to be hit. And I think that when the opportunity arises, he'll take that.
We have to turn our attention before we go today, because when these two meet in the ring, there's always fireworks. Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano face off in the ring for a 3rd time tomorrow night. This is at Madison Square Garden in New York. I mean, it's unprecedented, this, isn't it? What a rivalry, Spencer. Can Taylor Serrano live up to the billing for a 3rd time?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that, they'll take off from where they left off. We saw that first fight at Madison Square Garden, and the noise in there was absolutely insane. The Puerto Ricans and the Irish were split, and it was a fabulous fight. One of the best fights seen at Madison Square Garden, believe it or not. And we go into the rematch, and you say, well, could this one live up to the first one on the undercard of Mike Tyson, Jake Paul? and it delivered, and it lived up to it. I think that stylistically, these girls, they're proud and they'll put it all on the line. The first two were very close, very controversial in many ways. Katie Taylor won both of them, and I think that she gets the hat-trick. I think she gets the victory in an absolute barnstormer.
It should be, shouldn't it? And Katie Taylor's 39 now, Simon.
I wouldn't go against Spencer's knowledge, but I wouldn't necessarily discount Amanda Serrano in this fight. I think that she has the ability to unseat Katie. Katie's on the downslide. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but she's on the other side of her best performances, and it might be the right time for Amanda to register a victory. And if she does, who knows? You might see a fourth.
A fourth? I mean, I was going to ask, what's the point in a trilogy when one fighter's 2 up from the first 2?
Well, we had it with Tyson Fury more recently with Deontay Wilder, didn't we? I mean, that trilogy was a great trilogy. We had it with Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe would go down as, the best trilogies of all time.
But there was neutrality in those ones. With the Tyson Fury situation, the first fight was a draw, the second fight was a win for Fury, then there was an equalising opportunity which he didn't take. In this instance, Amanda's lost 2. So it's done, isn't it?
Yeah, but controversially. What I'm saying is it could have been.
And that's the point.
That's what I'm saying. When you look at it like that through the history, and you look at like Gatti versus Ward, and and the close fights they were, and 1-1-1, then you had the rubber match.
Yeah.
And you look at that historically, even Brera and Morales and all these great trilogy fights. But in this trilogy, what makes this one different is we've got Katie Taylor that's 2-0 up, but on any other given night in a different arena with different judges, it could have been the other way around. They were very close, so there's a lot of interest in this one. I go Katie Taylor again, and I think she comes to a razor-close decision again.
Wowzer. I hope you're right. Spencer, before we go today, and I'm afraid we've got to throw it in, but the sport still is in need of a clean-up, isn't it? Francisco Rodriguez Jr. faces an anti-doping investigation after his win over the British flyweight, Galal Yafai. He returned an adverse analytical finding after his points win in Birmingham last month. It always shows boxing up in such a bad light.
Absolutely. Look, if you look at Rodriguez's performance against Yafai, and you saw the way he was performing, and like he'd rolled back the years, non-stop punching, and like he was walking through walls. And it's like sort of when you get these adverse findings, you go, well, you sort of saw it in the performance. And again, boxing comes to the forefront. Is in the spotlight for the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
And you look at it, and I stand by this, Jim, and I've said it time and time again. I think the drug cheats, stop this 1-year ban, 2-year ban, because that entices them to take, to go there. They're thinking, well, if I come through this fight, I win the world title, I'm getting more money, etc., etc. Throw the book at them, life bans, and then it will sort it out.
Life bans, no appeal.
No
life
appeal.
Bans.
It's just because what happens when you have an appeal? You get a good lawyer, and then whatever governing body can't cope with that and can't go with them, and they end up getting cleared anyway. So it's just sort of for me, it's all wrong. I hate drug cheats within the sport, and I think they should be banned for life.
Do you go with that, Simon? Kick them out. But not just for a while, for all time.
We're talking about people putting their lives on the lines here. We're not talking about 100-metre sprinters or long jumpers or whatnot. This is a combat sport where people get injured and die in the ring. Performance-enhancing drugs, kick them out.
And if Spencer says that, and you've been in the ring, mate, and you've put your life on the line, literally,
nearly cost me my life. That's the point, and that's why I'm passionate about it.
It's hard to argue against.
No, absolutely right.
The ultimate penalty.
You might start with enforcing strict liability first, and then move on to the next level of banning people full stop. But I don't know whether one's striking you out. But the reasons why I in part agree with Spencer is because if you go into a ring, eventually someone's going to do this. Someone is going to go into a ring. Something awful is going to happen to another fighter, and then the fighter that administers that awful outcome is going to fail a drugs test. And then there's going to be uproar in the sport because all of a sudden, what do you charge him with? What do you charge him with? Commercial manslaughter. Because he's taken a drug, someone's died in a ring as a result of it, and he is now not only getting banned from the sport, he's responsible for someone's death.
I mean, Yafai was an Olympic gold medalist, a great young fighter, a great prospect, and you go the beating that he took there the other night, he may never come back from that again. So it could have been his career, his future earnings on the line. You know, you got to feel sorry for the kid when he goes in against a drug cheat and gets beaten up the way that he did because he showed heart and desire to hang in there, and it was 12 painful rounds for him there.
Well, finally, you two had Harlem Eubank on Top Boxing this week. Very briefly, it was Jack Catterall who came out on top. when the two of them met. What's next for Catterall? Is he going to get this world title? Tilt.
Well, I think he will. But I mean, we don't want to see that fight again, that's for sure, because I think stylistically it didn't work. You had two counter punches going in there. They weren't really committing. Then they decided to both commit at the same time. The injuries were terrible on both sides, even more so on Catterall's. He's come through that victory, and yeah, he wants a world title shot next. Where does he go from that? Who does he fight there? Is uncertain at the moment, but. Look, we're talking about a kid that should have been undisputed lightweight champion, never got a super lightweight champion, and never got the decision. So let's get him his just rewards and get him another world title shot.
You'd echo that?
Yeah, I'm assuming he's not going to go back down to 140.
Well, I think if the opportunity arises, I think he will, because he's jumped up from 140 to 147. He's competed very well there, showed that he's still carrying the strength. So I think the reason why he done that, Simon, was to say, listen, there's more to play with here, more to bargain. Give me a shot at 140. Give me one shot at 147. Just give me that shot.
It has to be stressed, even though Francisco Rodriguez Jr. returned an adverse analytical finding after that win in Birmingham just last month, he faces an anti-doping investigation and will no doubt on that occasion deny any wrongdoing. Spencer Oliver, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, mate. And next week we'll count down very much in earnest to Usyk against Dubois. Simon, thank you today, mate. Not least for inviting successfully the man at the centre of this Crystal Palace Olympic Lyon row, the US businessman John Textor. Palace likely to be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France that saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon will be in the Europa League next season, but the FA Cup winners Palace will not, due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. It's not going to stop John Textor, it seems, though, from buying another English club, as he revealed to us. We're coming up to 1 o'clock.